Good day, folks, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 79. Before we start, I've been having a few microphone issues before the stream. Could someone in the chat tell me if they can hear me properly, please? If you can hear me in the chat, someone please let me know? If you can't hear me, also please let me know. Thanks very much, Jack. Cool. All right. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune. Where are we? Oh. Yeah. Hang on. We don't want one. All right, that was The Lass That Loves a Sailor, which is a Royal Navy march. How are you going, John? I don't know if you'll be able to hear me this time.
Yep, all good now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, I could hear you before. Must have been a problem your end.
I don't know what was going on with the headphones because I could hear other apps and other programs absolutely fine, but I've changed and sorted.
No idea. I know I have an issue with my microphone. That I have the same issue that Academic Agent always talks about. Maybe he has the same sort of microphone, but if you touch the cable at all, it just cuts off.
Okay, it's just I'm just on my my phone headphones when I stream with you.
Fair enough. So long as you can hear me, that's cool. I don't know who else we're going to get today. Ataman didn't say he wasn't coming on, so maybe we'll get him in a little bit. But I mean, there's only really one topic this week, I suppose.
Yeah, there's not much of anything else to talk about, is there?
Well, no, because Ukraine continues the same way it has for a long time now, with Russia slowly but surely winning.
Is there something going on in Ukraine? Is there? I wasn't aware.
It's just the same as it's been for some time. Russia slowly but surely winning. Of course, there's the assassination of the Japanese former prime minister.
Yeah, but I mean,
he was a pretty base chap from what I can work out.
I don't want to be too spicy around that. I did see a meme, and maybe it's a bit too early, but it kind of said. It was kind of mocking America, and it was saying, Japan has like one gun, and they managed to get rid of an ex-PM, and America has hundreds of thousands, and it can't manage to do anything.
What you mean with creepy Joe Biden?
Yeah. No comment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously only in Minecraft. I mean, completely only in Minecraft. It's just a joke, Susan.
It's just a spicy meme, that's all.
Yes, it's just a joke, Susan, honestly. We believe in everything we're told to believe in on this channel.
Yeah, I mean that's sad. I mean I haven't looked too much into it, but it does sound like it was just a disaffected bloke who'd served his country and wasn't too pleased about whatever Abe was saying, and
I don't know. It's like everything I've read about Abe, and like going back quite a long time, has been quite positive. Like he refused to take in large numbers of refugees and all this kind of stuff because he said Japan had to sort their own problems out first, which I think, if only British prime ministers would do such things.
I mean, let's assume it is because he's angry at Abe's policies. I guess, we live in a globalized world, and you have a global attempt to brainwash people into believing these sorts of things.
I haven't managed to work out which of Abe's policies he didn't like.
Well, we probably never will know the truth, to be honest. But
I mean, I must admit, my first thought, as you know, when this happened, was Chinese Communist Party.
CCP
involvement. Because they detest him, because he has repeatedly said that Japan should and could help defend Taiwan, and the Chinese certainly don't want that.
I did find the media sort of reporting interesting. I do remember a couple of years ago when this Islamic preacher died, and they hailed him as a sort of Islamic scholar, and this guy was pretty wicked by all accounts, and yet Shinzo Abe's a divisive, far right. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. I don't know. George in the chat said that he had no objections to Abe's policies. This is the guy who assassinated him. Politics, but instead claims about him importing a foreign religion, a common historical Japanese complaint. I have no idea which foreign religion that might be, but anyway. As far as I know,
perhaps.
I don't know, but I mean, Japan's overwhelmingly Buddhist or Shinto, so I'm not quite sure what that would be.
Well, more precisely, obviously, overwhelmingly atheist at this point.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think you could say. By the way, good evening, Rupert. I think you could say that. About like most Western nations these days, they're overwhelmingly atheist in fact, if not in theory.
I think that's I don't think that's true. I think they're overwhelmingly agnostic.
Yeah, okay, that's probably fairer, John. All right, yeah, I'd take that. That's probably fairer. So yeah, okay.
I mean, there's also the possibility of some kind of foreign involvement, which is something I wondered about. I mean,
yeah, we were just saying when you came on, John, that I mean, my first thought, and I haven't totally discounted it yet, is that it had something to do with the Chinese Communist Party, but
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, he's basically the most bellicose and like militaristic figure in Japanese mainstream politics, at least.
Well, at least 3 times over the last 18 months, he said that Japan could and should help defend Taiwan. He also wants to get rid of the limiting stuff in the Japanese constitution. He wanted to get rid of the limiting stuff in the Japanese constitution.
Well, he already did that, didn't he? I think
he got rid of some of it, and the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, which is what they call their navy, which actually has more warships than the Royal Navy, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's about the 3rd largest in the world or something like that.
Yeah, it's actually a very powerful force, and it now has aircraft carriers again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be very easy to point to China. I think any nation that's interested in its own national identity would naturally be involved in destabilizing powers around it. I don't think that's an irrational thing to say or do for China.
Well, I mean, the Chinese detest the Japanese because of history. And I think Abe was a realist and realizes that if they do take Taiwan, then Japan's going to be next on their list.
Well, I mean, it's just part of the coalition, part of the anti-Chinese coalition that they would want to prop up. But I mean, the other thing is, depending on how the right reacts and how it's being portrayed, whether Abe becomes a martyr who ends up actually generating more support essentially for his politics and his legacy, then you could even perhaps talk about the US being behind it in some way, which would be another curious.
No, that did actually cross my mind. Cynic that I am, Rupert, but yeah, absolutely good point.
I mean, I don't know what the reporting in Japan is, but as I was saying, the Western media will report hate preachers as austere religious scholars, and then they'll report people who deeply care about the heritage and future success of their country as far-right Nazis. So it's certainly in the West he's not being portrayed. I mean, the Western leaders have come to his, they've all signalled their disappointment at events, but the media has, as usual, made sure to mention how divisive a character he was and how.
The Western media is.
They just. Yeah. I'm journalistic freedom be damned, as far as I'm concerned at the moment.
Well, I wouldn't mind if they were journalistic freedom to tell the truth, but they just bloody well lie all the time.
Well,
let me just answer Lee Ham in the chat. Lee Ham in the chat says, "Does Japan have actual aircraft carriers or helicopter cruisers?" No, they're actual aircraft carriers that will carry F-35s and are going to carry F-35s. They built these ships. They're converting 2 of their former helicopter carriers, which are actually bigger ships than the old Royal Navy Invincible class, as was used in the Falklands War, for example. They're much bigger ships than those. They're not quite as big as the Queen Elizabeth class carriers that the Royal Navy has today. But my guess is the Japanese will end up with more aircraft for them than we have, which is not very difficult, to be honest, at the moment. All right, because you in the private chat, Rupert has said he can't stay all that long. I'm going to say to Rupert first, if you had anything in particular you wanted to bring up as the first topic.
Not in particular, actually. I'm just actually, I'm glad that you come along, John, because I've been curious as to your take on the leadership prospects, the Conservative leadership prospects. Because I just find the whole thing depressing and haven't got that deep into it, but you seem to have been a little bit more active on the issue.
Could I just say, guys, before we get into that, and I definitely do want to get into it, I'd be interested to know what John and also Rupert thinks about dishing Johnson in the first place and the motives behind it.
Well, Rupert, do you want to go first, or
someone looked into the? I saw a thing about someone having looked into the registration behind the website that's currently being used to push Rishi Sunak's website.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak's domain was created or registered towards the end of last year. So he's been planning I think it was a handful of days after the story around Partygate broke. So he's been plotting it since then.
Yeah.
Wow.
And whether or not he's involved in leaking the story about Partygate, I don't know. But there are very few places from which you could overlook the gardens of number 10. And I would postulate that number 11 is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has motive if he's already been lining himself up to be a replacement.
He seems to be very, very, very in with the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, I have to say, who are pushing him like crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about just ignoring the media and ignoring calls to resign is that you kind of make enemies that way, and you just deepen the vendetta, so they'll always be planning to try and hit you harder next time on anything.
I think, yeah, this is the strategy he went with in his election bid, wasn't it, Boris? And I think that was under the sort of direction of Cummings, and I think it was out of the Trumpian kind of playbook, which is basically don't give the media anything you don't choose to give them, and you be the one setting the news cycle, not them.
What do you think of these stories, John, that Cummings might even be behind some of this stuff that got rid of Johnson?
Well, I've kind of said all along that I think the organisation of it, how it's been drip fed to the media, I do believe that there has been a concerted effort by a group of people to get rid of him. I thought that Gove might be involved, but the fact that Gove doesn't appear to have stood for leadership this time says possibly not. But I do have a theory, and I do genuinely believe that it does not matter who the Conservatives choose at this election, at this leadership election, the Labour Party will win the next general election. And so whoever gets the leadership now really isn't in it for the long term. They're going to be doing it for 2 years, and it's very unlikely the party stays with them when they're cast out into the wilderness as the opposition.
So you think it's a poison chalice?
Absolutely, I do. And I wonder if Rishi's doing it just so that it's on his CV before he moves back into the private sector.
Well, I mean, as No Name has said in the chat, greasy Rishi, Goldman Sachs World Economic Forum creature, which I largely do agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, Labour's not going to be any better at all in that regard. I think Labour will probably be worse, but I don't know. I'd love to be a fly on some of the walls, because there's some candidates that I would have expected to run that have chosen not to, and I think it's because they know, or they would rather wait for after the next election. I don't think they're stupid to do that.
Well, I think, I don't know if it was you, but certainly it was someone on your Discord who said that, like, the older guys,
Me.
yeah, they've only got one more chance, and if they try
They've got
it
one
this
shot
time and fail, if they try it this time and they lose, that's their chance gone.
Yeah, they'd rather wait. They'd rather wait till this person has their 2 years. They come in for the leadership when they're out in the wilderness. They lead them to electoral victory, because Labour Party will be a one-term party. I have absolutely no doubt about that. If Keir Starmer becomes PM, they will last one term only. And you'll see a repeat of the kind of, is it Macmillan and then, no, not Macmillan. It was it Macmillan into Home, into,
Macmillan,
Hume.
No, Macmillan was the Conservative, then Hume.
That's right.
Alexander Douglas Hume, and then we ended up with the Labour government, I believe.
Yeah, and then you flip back and forward. So is it Callaghan? And then
you had Wilson for a long
long
time, who there are strong rumours was attached to the Soviets.
It's a Labour government, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then Callaghan. And then I think we ended up with the very famous pedophile, yeah.
And then it swapped back to Labour again. There was the period of the 60s and 70s where basically you had quite a lot of elections, and it swapped back and forward basically every 5 years between Labour and Conservatives. And I reckon we're going to have a period of that again.
It could be. I mean, I think the economy is going to be so bad that it's going to be extremely difficult for any government
You'll see a lot of the same. You'll see a lot of the same policies. They'll just be recycled. You'll have price controls. You'll have wage controls. They're already talking about it now. We already have price caps on things like energy, which has absolutely screwed the energy sector, which has meant that we're now facing absolutely massive bills, like 3 times what they were even a year ago.
That's what I was going to say. So where does your assuredness that Labour would only be a one-term government come from? Because the cynic in me says they just throw all the money at the wall.
Because I think you're going to have a period of I don't think there's a resolution to the problem that there is at the moment. I think the resolution is what Thatcher essentially did, which is basically pull the plug on the money printing effectively and return to some form of austerity. I think that is the only way of resetting the problems we're in. I don't think either of the two parties at the moment have the appetite to do that. So all you'll see is more and more misery. And because it's miserable, people will think that the alternative is better.
So you just think that they'll go flipping back and forth until someone actually is willing to take a bit?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I tend to largely agree with John on that one, Rick. I just think we are going into what could end up being an actual depression, and with runaway inflation. And I think it's going to be very difficult for one government, to try and get that under control, because it's being pushed by all the policies that these governments are going along with, like the watermelon green shit, etc.
The problem is that the reset that Thatcher had to do was absolutely tiny compared to what we've got to face up to.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I don't disagree with that at all.
Well, whoever does end up being in power might get some reprieve if the policies that Johnson announced regarding energy, well, something resembling energy autarky come to be, because they'd be able to benefit from that.
This is when you get into the net zero stuff and which candidates are offering that and not offering that. And
well, I mean, they were talking about putting up nuclear plants, which obviously is a bit of a different thing.
Yeah, but the problem, well, I think part of the problem you'll have is that because the government will be flip-flopping back and forward, you won't get a clear and consistent approach to that. And you'll probably find that nothing gets built at all. I mean, they were talking about 2030, and they're not going to be there in 2030.
Yeah. But you've got to start. I mean, if you're going to build like nuclear power stations, if you're going to do fracking, if you're going to, I've even heard people talking about reopening some coal mines. If you're going to do that sort of stuff, you've got to start doing it now, and you won't get a result for at least 5 or 6, or maybe even in some cases 10 years.
And when you're talking about fracking and coal, nuclear is slightly different, but I mean, it would still be impacted. We're talking about a global market, so even if you start producing it yourself, the price will still reflect the global price. So you're not. I mean, you may have
not necessarily. I mean, not if you generate most, if not all, of your energy yourself. I mean, that's why France hasn't been suffering so badly recently from the energy price rises.
France's is heavily subsidized by their government.
Yeah, but it's also very domestic as well.
Which means it's heavily subsidized by the taxpayer. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it, they're still paying for it. You can't. There will be some economies you benefit from that mean that the price will be lower than it would be if it was shipped abroad and so on. But the global price sets the price, because if they can export it and get a better price than they would get for it in England, they will export it, unless it's nationally owned, in which case it's dreadfully inefficient.
That's not how a lot of these kind of core goods work, to my knowledge. I mean, this isn't how food works quite often. For example, they'll just quite happily shut off food exports and imports.
And a lot of nations are doing precisely that with food right now.
I mean, governments can do that, but again, you're talking about nationalized stuff, and if you do that, then there's no incentive to produce it necessarily, because the price you get is far lower than you could get elsewhere.
Yeah, hang on, John.
So the investment of capital doesn't happen.
Governments are stopping exporting food who have not nationalized stuff.
I'm sure they are, but they will cause problems for themselves down the lines as well by doing that.
Fine, but I mean, their populations won't starve, and I seriously think there's going to be real problems with food over the next few years. I mean, everything we're seeing is pointing towards a real world crisis. To be honest,
yeah, I wouldn't deny that. I think Ukraine is a big key part of that.
The Ukraine thing is part of it, and particularly the shoot yourself in the foot sanctions that the West has put on Russia.
I mean, Russia and Ukraine are what, the first and second largest grain exporters in the world? I mean,
between them, I think they're about the second.
No, I think between them they would be first, because they're about between them. They're about 40%. 40% grain exports.
Yeah, all right. Sorry, yeah, that's correct. Sorry, I misunderstood.
I was going to say, in terms of exports,
it's about 40% between Russia and Ukraine. It is about 40% of grain. Yes.
Yeah, and I think I'm right in saying that they're effectively one of them is the first largest and one of them's the second largest exporter.
Something like that. Yeah.
They have that much land and that lower population that they can afford to do that.
It does vary by region, though. So they export primarily to the Middle East and North Africa. Whereas,
yeah, sure, but again, it has an impact on global prices.
To an extent, yes, but you
can't get away from that.
Well, you can, because you can't just
hang on, guys. I mean, I know, for example, South Africa gets a lot of its grain from Russia, so it's not just North Africa.
I mean, as we're finding out with liquid natural gas, you can't just reroute where these resources go at a whim.
Yeah, whereas if the UK opens 2 or 3 efficient and highly mechanized coal mines, there's no reason that stuff can't go to a British power station. Same with fracking.
If you talk about on a timescale of like years,
I mean, you are talking about years. You can't just switch this stuff on and off in
No.
18 months, not at all. And to build a nuclear power station is even longer, I believe. But
Yes.
Britain needs to start all of that stuff and needs to start it sooner rather than later.
I'm not disagreeing with that in the slightest.
And I should say that's exactly the kind of situation that has traditionally been the case with export controls. So around things like food, when there's like a food, there's a shock to the food market, then they'll put a temporary moratorium. I'm not talking about just the government unilaterally deciding to nationalize all like the food industry forevermore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like to give a kind of off the wall example. In World War II, Britain used to buy the entire world's tea production and then sell off to other nations what the British didn't use. That's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
Britain used to buy the entire world's tea production in World War II, and what was not needed in Britain, they'd sell off to other people. So that sort of thing can be done, and it's got nothing really, in my opinion, to do with nationalisation or anything else. And I also think the whole global market thing is in grave danger of breaking up.
It's certainly looking a bit patchy at the minute, isn't it?
Well, more than that, yeah, absolutely, for sure it is. I just look, we're almost all nations, inflation figures are lies, because they massage the figures to make it look not as bad as it is. Happens in Australia, happens in Britain, happens in the US, happens all over the world.
It is possible as well, of course, Andrew, that they aren't massaged. It's just that the burden of inflation falls disproportionately on various people. So at the moment, a lot of the poorest people are seeing big inflation in food partly because the petrol prices are so high, partly because that impacts food as well, but also because of the limitations you've got around Ukraine and so on.
Yeah, but I mean, John,
inflation is taken as the market as a whole, right? It's not just individual products. So yes, for some people, like if you're talking about food inflation, you're probably talking 20%. But if you're talking about the market as a whole, you may well be talking closer to what they say. It's it feels worse because you and I don't buy a new car every 5 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, but even new cars are going up quite a lot.
That was a bad example.
But yeah, all right. But I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that in America, for example, there is a website in America which uses the way they used to. I can't remember the name of it now, but there's a website in America that uses the way they used to measure inflation in America, and they deliberately changed it some years ago to make it seem lower.
Yeah,
I think most nations do that now.
Yeah, well, because of its nature, it's relatively difficult to measure. I mean, the UK uses two different measurements: the RPI and the CPI. And one of the, I mean, as far as I understand it, one of them is basically a basket of goods, and the basket of goods changes depending on, what's in vogue essentially. And you're right, that can of course be manipulated to present different numbers. I don't know particularly what benefit they gain out of that, to be honest, but
to meet targets and make themselves look better, basically.
Yeah. But I mean, look, I think the reality is that next year, and I've been saying this for ages, our real inflation rates are going to be 20% plus.
Oh, I think they will use interest rates to try and keep that low. It's one of the reasons why I had 2 years left to run on one of my mortgages, and I went and got a new 10-year fix while the interest rate was as it is, because I do believe it's going to go up enough to mean that I'm better off having paid the early fee to come out of my existing deal and blah 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 blah. I think. Yeah.
I saw that. I saw you talking about that, and I think you did a sensible move.
Interest rates are, well, I think 2% will become the new zero at least. I don't think we'll see 0% or 0.25 or whatever it's been for the last 10 years anymore. I think those days are done.
But those tiny little rises that you're talking about there, John, are not going to affect inflation. I just don't think they will.
Well, I mean, that they will, because they slow the velocity of spending, which reduces inflation. But
Well, I think they're going to have to go up a long way to have any discernible effect.
Well, that's why I fixed my mortgage for 10 years. I do think they're tinkering at the edges at the moment. I think 2% will be the new floor. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to 4 or more for a short period.
That illustrates a problem, though, which I've heard raised elsewhere, which is that the prevalence of fixed rate mortgages now is potentially going to mean that the increase in interest rates is not going to have the effect that they want it to have. So they would have to jack it up quite away for it to have any noticeable effect at all.
But, and I can also say that that is exactly the same in Australia as in the UK. Like the Australians are doing what you did, John. They're fixing their interest rates.
Because they're sensible. The other problem is that if they, and this assumes that they're not intending for everyone to have to foreclose, but if they do go too high, I mean, most people my generation, if I talk to people about interest rates, they wouldn't know what you're talking about for a start. They've never known anything other than 0% effectively as an adult. And talking to them and saying, oh, your interest rate on your mortgage could well be 7% or whatever. They're like, they wouldn't even know what that means. I know that means it's like, that's territory. Well, I can't repay my mortgage, which is why I changed my fix.
Yeah, there'll be people losing their houses and all this sort of stuff.
An incredible. You're right. There are, many people do fix, and that will cause the banks a certain problem. But I do believe banks, they know what they're doing. They know what's happening. Even if they appear not to know, they very seldom are the ones that lose out. So they'll have baked a lot of as far as they can tell.
Yeah, I'm not denying for 1 minute banks will continue to make money, but you see, this is where I feel a bit of a disadvantage because I am not anything like an expert on financial stuff.
Oh, I'm not an expert. There's a guy on my Discord server that knows this way better than me.
George in the chat is saying you guys are talking about using CPI as opposed to the more honest RPI, which includes houses and energy prices.
Yeah, well, I did mention RPI.
Yeah, you did. I know you did. But I mean, like George, I wish you would still come on the streams, mate, because you would be able to talk about this in a much more intelligent manner than I can, because it's not my field. But as far as I can understand it, we are heading, and when I say we, I mean like the whole Western world, we are heading off a cliff, mate.
Yeah.
I really think we are. And I don't think any sort of tinkering... I don't think any tinkering by the governments is going to really make that much difference in the short term, anyway.
I don't think it's just the West. I mean, the debt it's all over the place.
Yeah, it is. But like, I'm
it is
about
like
the
a
West.
House of cards.
But I'm talking about the West because, like, I live in the West,
Yeah, sure.
and I basically care about the Anglosphere, I guess, and the Old Commonwealth. So. That's why I'm talking about it. I mean, yes, actually, Russia seems to be doing quite fine at the moment, but everybody else isn't.
Yeah, I'm not. I work in a company that is global, and we still have some interest in Russia, despite the fact I'm sure everyone would rather pretend that they didn't. And I have to deal with some of the exchange rates, and it's been really interesting to see what's been happening with the exchange rate to the dollar.
Lee Ham in the chat. My mum was telling me she had to pay 14% interest rates 30 years ago. I can manage 10% before I'm in trouble.
There was a period for, I don't know, it was about 3 to 6 months, was it, in the 70s, I want to say, where it was sort of 17% for a while.
I tell you what I remember, John, is in the mid 1990s, right? Which you're probably a bit too young to like have taken much notice of financial stuff back then. But I was buying my house then, and sure. The bubble in UK burst for 18 months, 2 years, and I knew loads of people who were.
It may have been the end of the 80s, 90s, maybe.
No, it was in the early 90s, and the bubble burst, and there were a load of people I knew, and I was living in like in moderately rural Berkshire, and a load of people I knew were in real trouble.
Oh, interest rates like that for any period of time will screw an awful lot of people.
That's kind of the point. Yeah,
that's kind of
exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're right, Riv. I don't disagree with you at all. But I think what we're looking at is this like
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Yeah.
well, and we're
I
looking
didn't
at
mean like that.
I think you're right, John. I think that's partly why it's being done. Leaving the pod and eating bugs.
You'll become a serf, but rather than being a serf to a possibly distant landowner who lets you kind of just get on and doesn't bother you much, you're going to be a serf to a bank who's going to have visibility over every single transaction you make and is going to decide whether you're allowed to transact on their terms only. And if you read the wrong book this week, you're not going to be able to buy your bus fare. And that's what they want to head to.
It's worse than that. It's being monitored by a algorithmic monitoring system.
Sure.
Yeah.
The lack
of
the personal.
Yeah, exactly.
Say the wrong thing on social media, and your bank account will get closed down, which is something I notice is increasingly being used.
Sorry, you said the wrong word in a tweet. That's points.
It doesn't matter what the context is, because I'm just a machine.
They won't care. And food shortages are going to help push the whole bug thing that a lot of people still think is a joke, and it isn't. It's actually being pushed in like schools in places like Wales.
I mean, I don't think it will have to even be pushed. I think, if you talk about places like China, I mean, what happens when the whole system comes falling down? It's mass starvation. You don't have to convince someone that bugs are good when they're starving and it's the only option.
Well, I won't eat them. I'd sooner starve. But I mean, this
is why
some people will.
I've watched a few food programs and stuff, and some not the mainstream media ones. Some of the stuff on YouTube, and they'll go to like wet markets in China and stuff, and there is nothing that is not on the menu.
Yeah, no, but the Chinese have always been barbarians in that way. But I mean, that's why they were able to use the excuse of bats and all that sort of thing with the original China virus crap, which basically no one now no longer believes.
Sure. I mean, disgust is a trait that is learned, by the way. So, I mean, I believe it stems from the fact that they went through a period of starvation, and when you're starving, you tend to eat anything. And
there's a lot of,
and that breaks the link. That breaks the link between that that learned disgust trait
and our enormously rich overlords who go to Davos and all this kind of stuff. That's exactly what they're relying on, in my opinion.
There's several, I think, periods where that was the case in Chinese history. So it's probably had like a multiple layered filtering effect.
Yeah,
there are some accounts that come out of like late Qing China of sailors and such who would throw the scraps of their food, or perhaps even just like I don't know, dead dogs and things into the what would it be, the Yangtze, maybe?
Yep.
One of the rivers. And then there would be people whose basically their entire existence was eked out by living on a boat and picking up those scraps and eating them and living off them.
Looking forward to that.
Oh, there you go. Job is talking about something a little bit like lower down the chain, but it's all part of this stuff. The missus just got told that she has lost work at 2 of the places she works at because they don't have enough kids. The recession is here. People are slashing their discretionary spending, and yes, they are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
I do actually believe that George might be right about this. By the way, disgust is not a trait that's learned. Disgust sensitivity is a highly heritable trait, and societies that have lost their disgust sensitivity, like Western Europe, will accept non-adaptive behavior. I mean, that
was my understanding as well, actually.
Yeah, we've all seen, little toddlers at Transvestite Story Hour, and what was that thing that was? I think it was in your Discord, John, the other week, where Bernardo's, the children's home, were advertising for LGBTQ workers. There was a time when LGBTQ people would not have been allowed near orphans.
Well, my understanding as well is that disgust is something which is one of the things that can predict whether somebody is right-leaning or left-leaning. So right-leaning people tend to have a higher disgust.
That's probably sounds like a cope. That just means that the parents have taught their children not to like transgender story hour, whereas the leftist parents haven't.
No, because it extends to things like mold and things that are dirty and likely to cause disease and such things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, like, eating things like dogs and horses, which is very anti-British.
Sounds French.
Yeah. Well, I don't think even the French eat dogs, but they certainly eat horses.
And frogs and snails.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't eat either of those things. I'm sorry, but there we go. But yeah, I think we're getting a bit off the subject. I mean, I just think there's an incoming tsunami of bad shit. And it's all combined all together. It's going to make Western people a lot poorer in terms of their standard of living in all respects than they have been for many, many, many years. And I think our overlords know this and are partly deliberately engineering it.
Perhaps. Yeah. Doesn't do to think about that way, does it?
I don't know. It's just what I'm thinking. Hang on.
I've been reading a lot of Stoic stuff recently. I'm planning a little series for sort of the Wellington Project, and
yeah, fair enough.
One of the things they I think it might have been Epictetus or perhaps Marcus Aurelius get into is the whole, and I'm sure it's across the board, but it's the whole idea that the only thing that can be taken away from you is the present. The past can't be returned to, and the future hasn't happened yet. It's they don't exist. The only thing that exists is the here and now.
What I would say is that if you can get out of the city, that's the first thing I would say to people, honestly, because cities are going to become hellscapes. They just are. And if there's any interruption in food supplies, and I think there will be, and power supplies, and I think there will be. I mean, the British government is already putting out stuff telling people that if they need to
don't eat your dinner till 8 p.m. Don't have your central heating on at 21. Have it on lower. Yeah. Or
there's going to be power cuts. Next winter is going to be fun, blokes. There's going to be loads and loads of old people, not just in Britain, but in all Western countries dying next winter because they will not be able to afford to heat their homes and at the same time eat properly.
That will be because of a certain disease, I should imagine.
Oh, they'll claim it. They'll claim that. Yes, of course they will, which is, utter nonsense because now we have the figures. The people who were dying were people who were going to die anyway.
Well, I mean, this is what I said right at the outset, is that you would probably see a high number of deaths followed by a period of low number of deaths because
the average
all it does is bring forward the deaths by a couple of months. That's all that happened.
Yeah. The average lifespan for a British man is 78, and for a woman it's about 83.
Yeah.
And if you look at the deaths from the China virus over the last couple of years, that's exactly when most of those people were dying.
That's not always the best way to do it because statistically, if you live to your 80s, if you live to your 80, you're very likely to live till you're like 90. So you're likely to live beyond that average. But the point is that whenever you have a heat wave, whenever you have a period of snap cold, whenever you have anything like a bad flu season, what you see is an increase in deaths for that period, followed by a decrease in deaths, so above the average followed by below the average. All it does is move those deaths forward a few months. There's no, for some people that's not the case, but for the majority that is what happens.
Yeah, it wasn't the Black Death 2.0.
And over a period, over a longer period, you'll have an average number of deaths that is no more significant or insignificant than your average year or your average 5 years or whatever.
Yeah. Unless it causes changes in the fundamental condition of the people.
Well, of course, unless it causes changes like you can no longer get an appointment with your GP or I was also get treatment at the NHS.
So, like, if basically everybody is struggling to afford heating, then that's going to potentially cause a lowering of immune systems.
That's another one. Or if everyone can't get food, for example, because you've shut down global supply chains, and of course.
Or if you're an old age pensioner on an absolutely fixed income, which because of the inflation and the economic nonsense that we're heading into, is not going to be increased.
I mean, if you take everything at face value and assume there is there's no conspiracy element to it, and COVID was what it was, they claim it was, and everything about it is correct, then I still assert that they will have done more harm through their response than COVID itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. The lockdowns were completely ridiculous and pointless. Absolutely.
Well,
I totally agree. But also there is increasing
just keeping the
evidence.
shops open.
Yeah, and there is increasing evidence, John, that some of the vaccines, at least, are doing more harm than the virus.
Well, I mean, they're all variously banned for different age groups in different countries. I think you're seeing various different responses to that now. I think in the UK, you've had the first payout from the kind of vaccine payouts governmental scheme, which is a farce compared to what should be happening. But
although of course I must say, Susan, we totally believe in everything you tell us, and the World Health Organization tells us. We are only.
That's why I never got a vaccine.
Yeah, me too. I've never had one. I've never even had a China virus test. But I mean,
I did because whether it was released or not, I think it's a genuine thing, and I have elderly relatives, and I prefer not to take it to them if I can avoid doing that. So
Yeah, no, I've never even had a test, and I'm 57, so I'm supposedly more at risk than either of you two chaps.
Oh, I've had whatever the latest strain is, and that was. I
think I had that.
For one day, it was a bit miserable.
I've just had normal colds. I haven't even had the flu over the last 2 years. I've had colds at worst.
I mean, I guess you wouldn't know because you've not tested, but
yeah, it's funny that, isn't
it? I mean,
if you weren't
I've had colds and tested negative, and I've had what, as far as I'm aware, is one bout of COVID and tested positive. So
no, but I mean,
my wife tested positive while I was testing positive, and she didn't have any symptoms whatsoever. None at all.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my point. If you don't know, if you haven't been tested, then how serious is it? It's like...
I mean, yeah, in my wife's case, she was walking around as if everything was normal. She didn't know. Without that test, she would not have known she had it. And if that is the case, and if it is transmissible in that state, then... how can you possibly act against that? You can't.
Well, I mean,
you can't stop something like that. So the fact that they tried was totally futile.
John, as far as I'm concerned, the fact that they went mad crazy all over the world, particularly in the West, of course, to make people go and get tested, to me, is the point. Because if it was a serious disease, you wouldn't need to be tested to know you had it.
Yeah, I mean, there's two schools of thought. So I guess, and I think we've talked about this before, so I don't know if we want to spend too much time on it. But certainly for England, what happened in the outset is the only people getting tested were people that were very, 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 very sick in hospital, and they'd gone to hospital because they were very sick, and because they were very sick, there was a good chance they died.
Yeah.
And they had no knowledge, no data, no knowledge at all on what the rates of infection were in the community as a whole. All they had to go off were, these people are turning up at hospital, these people are very sick, and that's why they're turning up at hospital.
And now we have, we now have plenty of evidence also that people who have been jabbed are still catching it.
Yeah, I mean, there was one person on Twitter just the other day saying, "Oh, if I'd been allowed to have my fourth jab, I might not have got COVID." Oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And if you did get it, and you've had 4 jabs, and you survived the 4 jabs, and you get COVID, a big deal, Yeah. And flu totally disappeared from Britain apparently for like 18 months. And people, then there was the nonsense of anyone who died for any reason who was found to have the China virus was then put down as a China virus death. I mean, again, utter nonsense. Just common sense tells you that's crap.
And here's the thing: they didn't even have to be tested necessarily to be put down as that. You do a clinical assessment, which is not necessarily by testing; it's by observation. So because they had symptoms, which could be symptoms for a whole host of different things.
Get run over by a bus and they'll put you down as a China virus death. I mean, and everyone knows the infamous case in New Zealand where a gangster was shot and then his autopsy found he had China virus. He was actually added to the China virus figures.
I mean, ridiculous. This is why I struggle to believe that. I mean, if there is a big conspiracy behind it, this is why I struggle to believe that your average politician is in on it, because I work in numbers and data analysis, and it made me laugh that the initial criteria for determining in England again whether someone had died from COVID it is if they'd ever had COVID and subsequently died. It didn't matter the duration between when they tested and when they and they found this out because there were people that were being reported as having died with stroke of COVID months after they'd recovered from it. And as you say, people getting run over by buses and it's like,
it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And that's why
how stupid do they think people are?
Well, this is why I think that is what happens when you don't set your criteria correctly. And I have a relative who was working for one of the big sort of businesses involved in accounting and business support and all that kind of stuff. And the government employed them. The government also employed another one, and they basically just threw an open checkbook at them. There was no, it's going to cost you X. It was just, here's the checkbook. You tell us what you want. And they threw anyone that wasn't busy on other projects, they just charged it to the government.
Make money.
You had there was no direction, no proper leadership. You had people running every which way, different companies trying to do the same thing. Total disaster. And that is what happens when you involve the state in anything.
John, it's not so much a disaster as a feeding frenzy of taxpayers' money.
Sure, of course, yeah, it's free money for Ernst & Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers and KPMG and all those companies.
Well, the same thing is currently happening in China, which is going to get interesting because the way that they are, they've got their whole zero COVID thing. So if there's even one case, then they'll potentially lock whole areas down.
But China's response has been always from the start totally insane.
Yes, but getting into the specifics is interesting because what they are doing with the testing is that they're having mandated testing that everybody has to go to, which in some cases might even be a spreader event if anyone is positive.
Yeah.
By the by, but also the cost of all of that, which is enormous, as you might imagine, is being charged to the local. So it's being dictated by the central government, but it's being charged to the local governments.
Brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows where they're going to find that money?
And of course, China's approach to this is partly influenced by their approach to life in general, which is that it's very cheap.
And as far as I understand it, the Western government's responses to the China virus when it first started, particularly in nations like Italy and then eventually in Britain, were very much like, let's copy the Chinese.
Well, it was reactive, and we had, and this has been brought up in Parliament. We had a pandemic. We had this assessment pack of things that we were meant to do in the case of these pandemics, and they basically just binned it, and they just went with the herd. They went with what everyone else was doing. And they were directly asked, well, why didn't you follow this? Why didn't you? You had a flu and COVID, because COVID pre-exist COVID-19. You had a plan for what to do if there was a pandemic, and you just ditched it immediately and went with, what China did. It's like, why? Why would you do what China did? They didn't. They hid it for months.
World Health Organization, World Economic Forum. I mean, I'm just saying, not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying.
The WHO obviously had some rather changeable guidelines, and
they were getting a lot of money off of China, I do believe, as well. But
yeah.
Well, anyway, I think we've done this a million times, and we're
exactly.
We've got more pressing events going on in the UK now.
I would agree. Now, first thing, beg your pardon, not China virus, because I'm a smoker who smoked for.
That's meant to protect you from it as well.
Yeah, I've been smoking for 45 years, mate, and I'm.
Iron Duke has been preemptively defending against COVID-19 for 45 years.
That's why I started when I was 14.
Exactly.
What I want to start us off with, I read an article today, and I don't know if this is true, that said only between 4 and 6 Conservative MPs have actually really thrown their hat in the ring so far. Is that true?
Yes, I think you've got Suella Braverman, Tom Tugendhat, you've got Rishi Sunak.
Transport Secretary? Transport Secretary?
No, Truss hasn't actually declared yet.
Transport Secretary.
Yeah, no, that's Grant Shapps. I think he has now. I think earlier in the day there was just the 4. I think you've got maybe 6 now, like you were saying. There's a few that have had MPs vocally support them, and they haven't said they're not going to run. People like Jeremy Hunt. I think, I'm not sure if no, that's right. Badenoch and Braverman have, Tugendhat has, and Rishi has. They were the 4 earlier in the day.
George
may have now done.
George is saying two more have just enrolled. I think that is Chats, the former transport
Grant
secretary.
Shapps,
yeah, who apparently is a colonist.
I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, he was a minister under the Cameron government. Yeah, exactly.
Well, a lot of them were. But...
here we go. Javid and Hunt have just entered. Well,
that's interesting because Rishi was begging Javid not to.
Well, I detest both of those men, so I don't care. So I wouldn't. I mean, Jeremy Hunt is like, I know he's an Anglo-Celtic dude, but he's the one Anglo-Celtic dude I wouldn't support. Like,
I don't think you want Tom Tugendhat either, to be honest.
I don't know about him. I asked Atman because Atman lives quite close to his constituency, but he hasn't replied, so I don't know about him at all. I know he served in the Territorial Army and actually saw some action in Iraq and Afghanistan, which to me is a plus these days. But
yeah, I mean, your Rory Stewart had seen action as well, hadn't he?
Yeah, I hated that dude. So
exactly.
Listen, I knew plenty of people in the army. I detested. So I mean, don't take me just on that. But I mean, if I'm looking at a politician who's actually served in uniform, I tend to, unless I find other stuff, I think, well, that's a plus.
I'm not denigrating that.
But yeah, so the BBC has got this big list of about 10 or 11 people.
If you
most of whom are not Anglo-Celts, by the way.
If you go to Guido Fawkes, the Order website, they on their front page they've got who has declared, who is expected to declare, and who all their supporters currently are.
What do we
in one table? So I don't know if you want to put that on the screen or something.
I'm not going to Guido Fawkes because I don't like Guido Fawkes.
Yeah, I mean, I blocked them on Twitter because they went.
I'm not going to give them publicity, John. But what I would say is, hang on, I've lost my train of thought now because I was thinking about Guido Fawkes. Sorry. Okay, Tuesday. I just think that a list of people contending for the Conservative Prime Ministership of Great Britain, which is minority Anglo-Celtic, is not a good thing. I just don't think it is. I mean, how can the Conservative Party, in inverted commas, have more non-British, non-real British than British people contending for the Prime Ministership?
Well, a number of them are. Let's be clear that the Conservative Party will make a big deal about the fact that they don't have all women shortlists and so on, but that they effectively had affirmative action under David Cameron, which I can't remember the program, but it was basically to accelerate a number of, shall we say, more diverse than your traditional Conservative candidate
It sure has worked, eh?
into positions of authority within the party, which, as you rightly point out, it seems to have been incredibly successful.
I mean,
there is a contingent of the Conservative Party that are kind of willing to, out social justice the left just to own Labour kind of thing. So
I'm not sure if it's that they're. I would agree there are some certainly within the party that are probably more keen on social justice than some Labour MPs, but I think a lot of them. Well, I think a lot of them probably react just as most people react, which is that they're desperate to not be called a racist, so they do everything they can to appear to not be racist, and they end up, going. Well, in my view, it's far too far the other way, isn't it? Because if the whole idea is that everything should be equal, you should have, I don't know, 10% of Parliament made up of ethnically diverse people, but it's actually in the Conservative Party, it seems to be a lot higher in these top positions.
Yeah,
a lot higher. Yeah. I mean, I always say, what would one's chance of being Prime Minister of India or Pakistan or Uganda or Mauritius or any of these other places be as a white bloke or a white woman, and they would be zero. They would be absolutely zero.
Oh, I think Tori Rebuttal in my Discord did point out to you that the Chilean president, I think it was Chile, is Croatian.
Yeah.
So
Chile had a Japanese guy as president for quite a long time.
Peru did.
Okay, Peru did, but that's South
Fujimori,
America. That's South America. It isn't Britain. All right.
So the South Americans are the woke.
I don't care who runs assorted second world South American nations. Don't care. I only care who runs first world Anglo-Celtic nations.
Okay. Rupert, do you want to? What's your view on?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to vote, really the only thing that's going to be determined by the leadership contest for me is just whether or not I even vote for them, and that's probably going to come down to, I guess whether I don't see anybody representing any kind of views that I would consider voting for, so it's going to be more just a symbolic thing. Maybe if I was going to be especially scheming, though I don't think this often works out, then I would lend some credence to the idea, or lend some voice to the idea of putting one of the wettest possible candidate in charge, just so that you can turn around and say, look, we tried this, time to go the other way, when they inevitably fail.
Yes, I think the problem we've got at the moment is that everyone in the country seems to think that we had the most fascist parliament that we've ever had, and therefore trying the other thing means going wet at the moment, which is humorous.
So it would be nice to have some rhetorical weight behind the idea that wet is not the way.
Yeah, perhaps.
I just wish that more than,
like I say, they're only going to be a 2-year PM. So
I just wish that more than 30 Conservative MPs were actually Conservative.
So we talked about this earlier, Iron Duke, and we differed on a couple of things, and
I'm coming to a real break, mate. I really am. I'm a little bit less depressed than I was when I was talking to you like 6 or 7 hours ago, but not much. I think the symbology of because like, all right, Tuesday FA, Tuesday in the chat is saying one thing is for certain, then your next prime minister will be BAME, and once you go BAME, you ain't going back. I think there is some truth to that. I really do. I don't totally agree with it, but he's not totally wrong. He or she. I think that I think there is a basic betrayal of the British people here, and I think that the whole knifing Johnson in the back, and I never liked Mrs. Alexander Johnson at all, as you guys know, but I think the whole purpose of doing that was to get a non-Anglo-Celtic person in the job of Prime Minister. I think that was the main purpose behind it.
Well, I mean, if all that yield is a very public like catastrophe that's on the hands of the first minority ethnic British Prime Minister, then that's some interesting optics to try and engineer.
I don't think you'll mate. I don't think you'll mate. I don't think you'll mate.
I think if we accept the premise that this is probably Rishi Sunak's coup and that Rishi seems at the moment the most likely to be PM, I think that was more in Rishi's own self-interest than had anything necessarily to do with the ethnic origin of his ancestors. But I've been on here a few times, and Iron Duke, I think you know, and perhaps some of your listeners know, I'm on the more paleo libertarian end of the spectrum. Personally, in my individual life, there's a lot that I do that would be considered classically conservative, but I come from the viewpoint that so long as I'm being left alone, I don't feel the need to control the minutiae of other individuals' lives. And if other individuals want to do things that I wouldn't necessarily do, then insofar as that doesn't impact on me, that's their business, and I wish them well, but I wish they'd do something different. And so I initially put my support behind Steve Baker, who would have been a traditional British Anglo-Celtic,
but a libertarian.
Well, like I say, I'm a paleo libertarian, so I recognise.
Yeah, John. Just to let you know, I used to be very highly libertarian, but like a lot of other libertarians, I moved away from it as I gradually realised it's like it just will never work.
Yeah, I mean that's your choice, but I fundamentally believe that a lot of the principles that people like Steve talk about are valid principles, and they're aspirational if nothing else, and I'll leave other people to fight in the mud.
Oh mate, 10, 12 years ago, I would have called myself a libertarian. I'm not now at all.
Sure. I mean,
without wishing in the least to disparage you personally, I'm absolutely behind the lolbertarian thing now. I really am.
Yeah, I mean
it like in terms of governments, it does not and never can work.
Well, the idea is that you want less government, so
yeah. But the thing is, you can never get to that. I don't think. Well, I don't think it's practical.
Well, if you don't think it's practical, then we are heading down the route of socialism, because socialism is just more and more and more until the government controls everything. So, I mean, either you believe in less government or you believe in more government. There's no. I don't believe in no government. I believe in. No, I don't believe in no government. That's why I'm more of a paleo libertarian than a libertarian.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. I get what you're saying, but I mean, look, I believe in small government rather than big government for sure.
Yeah, I mean. But the kind of night watchman state.
Yeah, I mean, governments should look after external defence and provide like some basic services.
Yeah, and this is I think there's a distinction to be made between the ideal and where the ideal meets reality. And Steve Baker's pragmatic enough to realise that you cannot run on a libertarian platform in the UK that says, welfare. No, you look after your own welfare. He's very conscious of the fact that there would have to be some kind of social safety net for people to accept that as a proposition.
John, tell me something. How old is Baker, and how
51.
old is Braverman?
She is younger. I don't know how old she is.
So why
Probably in
would
her late 30s, early 40s.
All right. So given any sort of small c conservatism, why would Baker go away in favour of her?
I've told you, I believe it's pragmatism. I believe that whichever PM comes in now will be a 2-term PM. I think Steve Baker, as he said in his interviews, is very conscious of the fact that he has not held, let alone any of the great offices of state, which is typically required to become a Conservative PM. He's not held much in the way of any office within the Conservative Party. And I believe he's hoping to buy an office through his support, which is what I think a lot of these MPs are doing, by the way.
For sure.
In standing.
Yeah, for sure. But what has Braverman held?
Well, she's the Attorney General, which is the senior most legal person in the government.
Which is ridiculous, but okay.
Well, only if you assume that she's incapable of doing a job.
Which I do. But yeah.
Well, I mean, that's up to you. I mean, I've never been to the legal bar, have you?
Mate, I don't believe women are very good at that stuff, to be honest. I really don't. Listen, I'm a patriarchy guy for 100%, and I don't lie about it either. So yeah.
Listen, you know how I run my own home, Margie. I'm the breadwinner. My wife stays at home, and she home educates.
Mate, I have nothing against you personally. I know you're a traditional man. That's why you're in my Discord. That's why you're on my streams. I'm not criticizing you in the least bit for any of that.
I come from. I think, when I read Enoch Powell's Freedom and Reality, that kind of made a number of things click in my mind in terms of how sometimes you have to compromise, sometimes you have to be pragmatic. That's why I think Steve Baker is being pragmatic. Like I say, he's one of the older ones, relatively. He knows. He will have done the calculations.
He's only got one chance. Yeah.
He will know, looking at it, that there is no way that whoever comes in now is going to fix this sinking ship. So he knows it's a poison chalice, but he knows that if he backs the right candidate, if he brings whatever support he has, which is potentially quite broad because he was chairman of the ERG among other things. He could potentially make or break someone's bid, and by doing so, he secures an office that might help him in 5 years' time. Whereas Suella Braverman, she's younger, she can probably afford to risk being a very short-lived PM now and bounce back and come back later. So
let's hope not. But
she might be thinking the same thing, which is that, well, if I build a block of support now, I can put that behind the person I want to be PM, and then I can get a good job. Yeah, there's a lot of that will be going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely there is. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but
and a lot of these candidates know that they have absolutely no way in hell of getting the top job, but they're doing it to build that base of support to then put behind someone else so that they get a good cabinet job. That's what they want.
Yeah, look, I'm not disagreeing with you in the least degree, John, but this whole thing seems to me to be organised to try and get a non-Anglo-Celtic person as
I think you're reading too far into it.
Well, okay, I mean, maybe I'm in too much into conspiracy theories, but that's what I think. I really do. I think it started off as Dominic Cummings deciding he was going to kill
the Conservatives.
Kill Johnson.
Possibly.
And Mrs. Johnson, by the way. But and like I know I call Alexander Johnson Mrs. Johnson, but I'm actually in this case talking about his thought, who apparently didn't like Cummings. And Johnson was such a weak cuck that he allowed that to influence him. I kind of liked Cummings, but I think this started off as that. and it's now turned into something totally different. And people like the Biased Brainwashing Corporation, of course, who love everyone who is not a white Anglo-Celtic person, are now totally getting behind Rishi Sunak, who
I mean,
a mere 2 months ago was getting
I'm
absolutely hanged, drawn, and quartered for all his family's tax dodging deals.
If you believe the narrative, Rishi is the number 2 in the worst government we've ever had in the history of governments, the most fascist, right-wing Nazi government, and yet somehow Rishi Sunak is now qualified to be the leader of the next government. Within the House of Commons, there is one person more senior than Rishi, and that's Boris Johnson. If Rishi Sunak as number 2 can't influence the most fascist regime on the planet and actively participates in it, then surely that disqualifies him from the leadership in their eyes. But of course, it doesn't, because it wasn't the most fascist regime on the planet. That was all just rubbish to get Boris out.
Yeah. I mean, I never liked Boris, as you well know.
No,
I never supported him. Didn't vote
Boris
for him.
had his problems, and people voted Conservative because Boris was, of the bunch, the only way that you get any form of Brexit over the line.
Yeah, 100%. And he then betrayed it because he wouldn't do anything about Northern Ireland and kept signing us up to all sorts of defence deals with Europe, etc.
All of this is about moving. Not saying you're moving the goalpost, but all of it, and maybe the goalpost. All of this is about moving this line in the sand, this Overton window, and Boris at least pushed it a degree the other way. And of course, all you've heard since then is Brexit is terrible. All the problems we've experienced are because of Brexit. It doesn't matter what else is going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah,
whatever bad is
I've
happening.
Totally ignored all that because it's all bungum.
But of course, it isn't. And what I mean there is not that it isn't. Sorry, what I mean there is not that it is rubbish. What I mean there is that in the eyes of the average person, it isn't. And if you get outside of our circles and you sit at work and you listen to what people are saying, to them, it's not rubbish. That's all they ever hear. It's the same in America, and it's the reason why I don't think Biden lost that election, because all you had for years was Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, and that's all anyone talks about. If you get outside of our circles,
listen, I'm not going to agree with you here, John.
What's if you say Trump to a normie, what's the first thing they say to you? And because I've had this experience, you mention Trump and they go, "Oh yeah, he told everyone to drink bleach to cure COVID," and it's like, no,
I've never heard one person say that ever. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you speak to like some real thickos.
I have to live in the real world.
Yeah, no. Look, listen, mate. You obviously have to speak to people for work and this kind of stuff. But and I'm semi-retired, and like the work I do is like writing history and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably slightly different in that respect. But I have never heard anyone say, "Oh, Trump told people to drink bleach." Never, not once in my life.
Listen, even my parents. Dude, it honestly, stuff like that just it sits in people's brains and they can never let go of it because that's what they were told, and they never spend a moment to read around it. They never listen to the whole tape or take in any of the context. They never look at anything online that says actually they do use light to treat some of this stuff. But Trump is an old man, and he's not a medic, and he doesn't understand that you can't use it in the way that he was suggesting that it might possibly have been able to be used, and had they looked into it. Not, you must do this and go drink bleach and go take horse deworming tablets and whatever. But people believe nonsense. People do believe nonsense.
Oh yeah, for sure they do, but less and less. I mean, I believe that I believe that these days, the trust of the average normie in a Western nation is vastly lower in the mainstream media than it used to be.
I would say you get occasions like my wife. She home educates. She's a member of a load of home education groups, and it was quite funny the other day. But this is an example of this. So you'd think people who home educate would be sort of naturally kind of like skeptical of big government and stuff. But in this group, someone had posted, very innocuous. They weren't trying to convince anyone. They just asked the question: does anyone know? Is anyone else awakened? If you are, do you want to talk about it? Because like I say, it's just not something you can talk about with most people. And the vitriol they got about how, you're a QAnon, you're a Trump supporter, blah 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 blah, from these people who you would think would be less inclined to be in favor of the big government stuff. It was just ridiculous.
All right. Well, look, I will say the British media was like really anti-Trump the whole time.
Yeah, so was the American media.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I like basically the way I work my thinking is anything the British and American mainstream media says is almost certainly a lie.
Join the club.
Because it is.
The mainstream media wanted to get rid of Boris, so I wanted nothing more than to keep Boris in.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know as well as I do, John, that I was of the same opinion. Not because I liked Alexander Johnson, but because I knew anything coming after him would be worse.
This is the thing. I would rather have an incompetent WF shill than a competent one.
Yeah, totally agree.
That's my choices.
George in the chat is just saying to me, women can be ferocious lawyers and it's baby thing to say they can't. I wasn't saying they couldn't be, George. What I was saying is women shouldn't be the Attorney General. All right, I know women can be ferocious lawyers. Women can be very ferocious, particularly when protecting their children or some other childish belief that they hold. But they shouldn't be the Attorney General. Sorry, that's my opinion.
But no, as for who I'd endorse for candidate at the moment, I'm anti-Rishi.
Every sane person should be anti-Rishi.
But no, I mean, I know you have reasons why you don't like them. I live here and have to be pragmatic, and I'm a member of the party. And if I look at them based on policy and their voting record, I have some reservations. But I would, if I was given a choice between Rishi and Suella, I would vote for Suella. Rishi and Kemi, I would vote for Kemi. If I was, if I was given a choice between Kemi and Suella or Tom Tugendhat, I'd probably go for Kemi or Suella.
All right. Well,
the non-Anglo Celt, because if I look at their policies and where they stand and their voting record, most importantly, because it doesn't matter what people say, it matters how they vote.
Yes, I agree.
They represent more of what I would like. They are very outspoken against the critical race theory. They're BAME. So, of course, they value their own history, as you would expect them to. But they're not about forcing it down your throat. They're not about saying, oh, black people get this history month because white people get all the other months. That's what they're not about. And I can appreciate that. And being as I have to live with them because they're in my country and they're not going anywhere, I would rather they were speaking my language than someone else's language. That's what I would say. I'm looking at this through a pragmatic lens. If I could go back in time and stop all immigration entirely and voluntarily repatriate as many people as wanted to leave with proper sums of money rather than the paltry sum that was offered by the Conservatives up until quite recently, where they curtailed it over COVID, I would, but I can't.
Oh yeah.
And so I have to live in the reality that we have.
Yeah,
I was born too late to do anything about it in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and fair enough, John. Look, that's your view, and it's your view, and I can understand it as a pragmatic view. I just think that pragmatism is not going to serve us anymore.
I'd love to close the borders today. That would be my, I would have net zero.
Even that's not enough. You've got to close the borders and have net zero legal mass immigration. Never mind all these thousands and thousands coming across the channel on dinghies.
I'm a big fan of Powell. I think saying it without saying it outright, he was very clear that you have to fix it now. And now was when he was talking in the 60s and 70s. I think it's around 63, 62. Right. Because once the genie's out of the bottle...
Well, he was actually talking about 67, but yeah, all right.
Sure. But once the genie's out of the bottle, and he was talking about 10 to 100,000 gross immigration. We're talking about 400,000, 300,000 net. So 1 million people with 700,000 leaving, and that's the ones we know about, as you quite rightly point out.
Yeah, there's everyone admits, like with any comments, there's 1 to 2 million illegal immigrants in the UK. Anyway,
I've read a lot of his stuff, and I think he would be disappointed to see what has happened. But I think
that's the understatement.
Probably an understatement. I think he would be. He lived long enough to know that he wasn't listened to on that subject, and that it only ever got worse from that point. And I think you do reach.
Instead of Powell, the Conservatives
went for paedophile Heath.
Yeah, a pedophile, for God's sake.
Not that they knew he was a pedophile, of course.
Well, I'm dubious about that, but yeah.
Well, general public.
But the overwhelming majority of the general public supported Powell.
I think he would say at the point that we are at today, having done nothing, the only thing we can do, the best thing we can do now, is close the border, limit the amount, and try our best to integrate what we have, and also help anyone who wants to leave. Because bear in mind, he was not in favour of involuntary repatriation. He was only ever in favour of voluntary repatriation, which was to say that, okay, you don't want to be here, we will help you to go.
All right, John, this is an important subject, and I will say this. I am in favour of very, very generous payments to help anyone up to the third generation to go back to their nation of origin. But I'm moving.
Powell wouldn't have even said nation of origin. I think in one interview, he's basically like, well, wherever they want to go, wherever they can go. Like,
absolutely.
If they want to go to America and America will have them, great, we'll pay for your visa.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that too. But I am increasingly moving to, like, in the end, if Britain's going to survive as a nation, we're going to have to be a bit more hard than that.
I don't think there's any appetite for that, and I think
not yet, but there will be. Not yet, but there will be.
But of course, by the time there will be, it'll be too late. I think,
No, I don't think that's right. I think that is coming quite quickly. I think that's coming quite quickly.
I would argue America are further on that path than us, and there's no sign
No, because America has had these guys from the time it was founded.
Oh, sure, but again, in relatively...
Britain has had them even in tiny numbers since after World War II.
Yeah, but I mean, Britain didn't have the NHS till after World War II, and everyone thinks it's been around forever. It's institutionalized.
Do they think that? I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know. I think intelligent conservatives could wean the British people off the NHS, to be honest. But,
I think Labour did more to wean people off the NHS, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, they did, because conservatives never tried to conserve anything.
Well, the Conservative Party, every time the NHS comes up, and not just the party, by the way, many of their supporters will happily tell you that it was a conservative idea, and I sit there with my head in my hands thinking, you shouldn't be proud of that, you idiot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I made the point some time ago that, like, Winston Churchill's World War II national, in inverted commas, government was far more a Labour socialist government than it was a Conservative government.
Any top-down directed government is going to be more socialist than a conservative government. That's the nature
And
of
and
socialism.
most real conservatives
It's
in
a command economy.
Yeah, and most real conservatives in the 1930s didn't like Winston Churchill because he had, after all, he crossed the floor. He crossed the floor to the Liberals in 1908 over imperial tariff preference, and then come back to the Conservatives because he didn't like Liberals anymore, or basically he thought he might lose.
I saw someone say this the other day. Maybe it was you, and I hadn't realised this. And I don't know if it's truthful, but did he essentially form that wartime coalition more with the backing of Labour than with Conservatives?
Yes, absolutely he did. Yes, he did. And the majority of his ministers were socialists. Which is partly, of course, why he lost the general election he held in 1945.
Yeah, he was immediately ejected as soon as the first opportunity came up, right?
Because he
Although
was not.
They did bring him back.
Yeah, eventually they did, because the Conservatives decided, well, actually, let me change that slightly. People like Anthony Eden and what was his name? You Never Had It So Good. I'm trying to remember his name now. The guy who was prime minister in the 50s, who I didn't like at all.
Labour or Conservative?
No, Conservative. Conservative. He was with the book publishing company.
Not sure. Can't remember.
Oh, for God's sake! He's not. We were talking about him earlier on the stream, actually. It will come to me in a minute. He was the guy who took over Macmillan. Thank you, George.
Macmillan.
I never liked Macmillan. But Macmillan and before him, Anthony Eden, were absolutely steeped in World War II socialism. This is why Macmillan came out with his infamous winds of change speech in Africa in the 1950s, which basically foretold what was going to happen to Rhodesia and South Africa and all the rest of it. And I detest all these people, man. I just detest them. And I have not the slightest time for any of them. And now I'm faced with a list of people running for basically becoming prime minister as leader of the Conservative Party.
Sure.
Which is majority non-Anglo-Saxon. Sorry, mate, never going to support that. If that happens and we end up...
Well, hold on. You did say you would support a Gurkha if they'd done 12 years service.
I did.
So
it
isn't the case that they must be Anglo-Celtic.
No, I did.
You would make exception.
Yeah, I would. If there was a Gurkha rifleman in the British Parliament who had done 12 years service in the British Army and was then being put up by the Conservatives as, all right, this bloke could become prime minister, I wouldn't be against him on race, not at all.
Which is why I put it.
But that is the one exception I will make. Because, and do you know why? Because I regard the Gurkha Rifles as honorary Britons. Honorary Britons.
Sure, because as individuals they've done. I mean, you wouldn't be in favour of just any old Nepalese person coming here, would you?
No, not at all.
No, exactly. But what you're in favour of is people who have demonstrated dedication and service above and beyond. Your average citizen, and bravery, dedication, service, bravery, above and beyond the average citizen, and therefore they've demonstrated their worth to the country.
And also
am I wrong?
And also from a group that has 250 years almost of service to Britain and the Crown.
Sure, but again, you wouldn't give that credit to every Nepalese person, would you?
No, they have to.
They have to prove their individual merit.
I wouldn't even give it to every Gurkha.
Sure.
12 years service minimum.
Because like we said earlier, we were talking about my grade. You brought up in my Discord server about the fact that you'd served in the army, and I was like, well, my grandfather served in the army, but his views would be very, very different to yours. It's not necessarily that you've served; it's that you've demonstrated that you're an asset to the country as a whole.
Well, you're really willing to risk stuff for the country, is what I
Sure,
would
sure. But
really
my granddad was, you know.
yeah, fair enough.
But he's got entirely politically different views to you, and to
Sure.
me, in fact.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't want my granddad running the country, regardless of how much service he'd done, because he wouldn't run it the way I would like it to be run.
Well, as I said to you earlier, John, like like I knew people in the British Army who I detested, so I'm not not disagreeing with you at all on that. All that does is give you some sort of base to judge stuff on.
Sure. And so what I would argue you're saying, and feel free to disagree with me, but this is the way I interpret it, and this is the way I understand it logically, is that you're saying if you've demonstrated a willingness to serve your country in a, you know, in a significant capacity,
And you're a Gurkha.
then okay, well, the Gurkha part doesn't necessarily matter because it's
No,
not
it does.
that
It does to me.
No. It's not that they're No, we've discussed this. It's not that they're Nepalese.
No. All right, let me try and
it's
explain
that they've
myself.
served.
John, you haven't got it. All right, this
Okay.
is what I'm trying to say. If you're a Gurkha with 250 years history behind you, and you've done 12 years in the British Army, then I might. And nobody else. Nobody else at all.
Even if that Gurkha turned around and said, "I'm a Marxist."
No, of course
right.
not.
So it doesn't matter that they're a Gurkha. It matters what they say
if they're
and
not,
do.
If they're not a Gurkha, they ain't going to get my support anyway. All right.
So it doesn't matter if they serve in exactly the same capacity.
It doesn't matter if they serve for 50 years and they're not a Gurkha. They're not getting my support as Prime Minister.
Can you see how I think that doesn't make any sense? Because you say it's not that. No, but listen, you say it's not that they're a Gurkha. It's not because they're a Gurkha that they get that benefit, because you say you wouldn't apply it for all Gurkhas. And then you say it's not because they serve that they get that benefit. So how am I meant to understand that together?
I regard Gurkhas who have served in the British Gurkha Rifles as
but not all of them.
No.
Because you said not all of them.
All right, let me try this again. I'm going to try and explain myself if you'll let me.
I'll listen. Yeah, I won't say.
All right. My deal is this: if someone is a former Gurkha rifleman who have served 12 years at least in the British Army, I will say, I'll speak to you in a minute, George. I will say that, yeah, all right, they're an honorary Briton. And on that basis, I will not totally go against them. But the Gurkhas are the only people who are not Anglo-Celts who I will regard in that manner.
Okay. Well, for me, if I were to argue my point, I would say that I believe that people who make valuable contributions to this country and who align with me on matters political, economical, social, and they are British citizens by dint of the fact that their countries were part of the British Empire at a time where, being
yeah, all right.
Well, that's the reality.
The Gurkhas were never part of the British Empire, by the way.
I don't. That's fine. I don't mind. If a Gurkha, if a Gurkha, if a Nepalese person enrolls in Her Majesty's Army, serves for 12 years, I would have no problem with that Gurkha if they had the same political identity as me, running for PM, and I'd have no problem voting for them. As it sounds like you wouldn't either.
No, I wouldn't either. But everybody else, I would.
So it isn't that they have to be Anglo-Celtic.
No, they have to be Anglo-Celtic or Gurkha. It's that simple.
But not Nepalese.
No, just being Nepalese is nothing. I don't care about
and it doesn't matter if they're Nigerian and they've served Her Majesty's Armed Forces for 12 years and done everything a Gurkha could have done.
No, doesn't matter at all.
They could have done everything a Gurkha could have done.
Absolutely, and I would still not vote.
It doesn't make any logical sense.
Well, there you go. Then I'm not making any logical sense, but I think I am to most people who are really British.
we have to agree to disagree, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So what was George? What was George?
George was saying my logical arguments are not very good, and he's probably right, but I don't care.
No, listen, you've got your own opinions, and you're entitled to those opinions, and I don't, I'm not going to dismiss you. And I've said,
what George is not understanding is my one single exception for this is the Gurkha Rifles. It's my only. It's nothing to do with Nepal. It's the Gurkha Rifles. That's my only exception. If you understand that, then I'm entirely logical. Like, I regard Gurkha riflemen as honorary Brits. Not just from their service and bravery and courage and skill, but from 250 years of loyalty. I'd make
but that's
loyalty. My one exception. Nobody else. Well, we've had this discussion, John, and I think their loyalty is a bit more than you think it is. But
I'm doing the opposite of denigrating the Gurkhas. I'm saying that if someone serves as a Gurkha, whether they're Nepalese or not, their contribution is valid.
Well, and you can't be a Gurkha unless you're Nepalese.
Sure, but that's like taxonomy. I mean, there's no call them something else. It doesn't matter if they serve in the same capacity. They provided the same benefit.
Not to me.
No, and that's your Look,
Jamaicans.
To
Jamaicans are not Gurkhas.
They're not
Gurkha. And let me change that. Jamaicans are not Gurkha rifles. And I'm only talking about Gurkha rifles, nothing else.
To me, my exception to whether they have to be Anglo-Celtic British is whether they've served the Anglo-Celtic British in a valid capacity. And yes, that could be militarily. Yes, it could be politically, but only if they align with my political views. I don't have any time for Diane Abbott. I don't have any time for David. What's the larger African?
Yeah,
chap?
I know.
You know who I mean.
Yeah.
But
the dickhead who's got like a 80 IQ or something.
Yeah, David Lammy, and it remains to be proven whether someone like Kemi Badenoch has the ability. And so that's why I remain a bit skeptical. But what I do know is that in the private sector, at least, she's worked in some very senior positions. She has the capacity. She says things I like to hear, and she backs that up with votes in Parliament in ways that I would like her to vote. And, there are certain boxes she doesn't tick for me, but in the main, I could find myself voting for her if that's what it came. If it came down to between her and Rishi, for example, I would side with her over Rishi.
All right. Well, what I would say is my only possible exception, because I want to make myself clear here, and I'm not inconsistent, is I regard guys who have served in the Gurkha Rifles as exceptional, and those people I would regard as honorary British. Okay. But if one of those people had views I didn't believe in, then of course I wouldn't support them. All I am saying is the one exception to my Anglo-Celtic rule, and it is a rule.
I mean, that's what proves the rule, right?
Yeah. The one exception that proves the rule is guys who have served in the Gurkha Rifles for a considerable time and who totally agree with my views. They're the only people I would make an exception for. Everybody else, I will not make an exception for. I don't care if you call yourself a child of the British Empire or any other BS that some of these people come up with. I would chuck you away so quick your feet wouldn't touch the floor.
Rupert, I've done a lot of talking. What do you think? Has either of us swayed you with our?
Rupert's gone, mate. He's gone long
Oh,
ago.
is he? Oh, I didn't realise he'd gone. He never said.
No, he went long ago. He's put it in the private chat.
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, no. As I said, I'm not inconsistent. I have absolutely a consistent view. I just regard the Gurkha Rifles, who've served in the British Army, as a slight exception, and they're the only exception I accept.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Look, people will try and say, "Oh no, Andrew, you're fucking stupid," and blah blah blah. I don't care if you served in the Jamaica Rifles. I don't care if you served in the RAF as a Muslim. I don't care. You don't count. Sorry.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So, if you said to me a Muslim, I might find that more difficult because a Muslim's ideology at a fundamental level is different to mine. I'm a Christian,
agree.
so it wouldn't matter if the Muslim ticked a lot of the same boxes. I would find it much more difficult to vote for them because I know that their ideological worldview, even if it aligns with me in the political, it doesn't align with me in the social.
All right, here's another one.
And that's why I if we were talking about Suella and Kemi, I would possibly find it more difficult to go for Suella because Suella's a Buddhist. Not that I have anything personally against many Buddhists.
I won't go for either of them, but yeah, okay.
No, well, we know.
Lofa Sheffield in the chat has a reasonable question.
Okay.
What about an Irishman born in India who got blown off his feet running comm lines, advancing through Italy, served in an artillery regiment, who had to reapply for British citizenship? Look, John may have a different view to this, but my own view is I'm not against loyalist Irishmen so long as they're loyalist. Simple as that.
Well, I mean, you'd argue that they were part of the Anglo-Celtic diaspora, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would. That would be my point.
In my Discord, I raised the difficulty because you've said, and hopefully I'm not revealing anything I shouldn't reveal, but you said in your Discord you could perhaps put your support behind Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes.
Who is, of course, a Catholic.
And I would immediately, actually, if he stood.
And of course, 200 years ago, if you'd said that, you'd have been in deep trouble. He couldn't serve in any of the senior offices of state because of his religion.
Not officially.
No, of course. And 200 years before that, you'd have been killed for that point of view.
Yeah, but look, what's my avatar, John?
Well, I understand, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but what I'm trying to say is we're at a similar crossroads now. And you can say it's not similar if you like, but to a Protestant and a Catholic, there is nothing big. That is a big gulf of divide. And I would argue, in the same way ideologically it's a big gulf of divide, it is just as big a gulf of divide visually for a black person and a white person. And I would argue that as a religious person who is in the Protestant category, although given my own particular beliefs, they might not accept me, but that's fine. I'm certainly not a Catholic.
High church or low church, man?
Technically low church, although my own personal views are more high church, I think.
All right, because I'm an agnostic, as I have said many times.
Sure.
But I got married in a High Church of England church. My son was baptized in a High Church of England church.
Sure.
And the difference between those guys and the Catholics is not huge. It's really not huge.
It was big enough. It was big enough to separate from the church and end up with your head of state excommunicated and cause a massive rift across Europe, which could set the tone for European.
But John, the High Church of England today is really the result of. No, hang on, let me finish.
Yeah, but the High Church of today isn't the High Church of 200 or 400 years ago.
Of course.
The Protestant Church in England today is totally paused.
All right, yeah, and I agree with that totally. What I was trying to tell you was that the High Church of England today is a move from the more traditional side of the Church of England to move back to more traditional stuff. That's why it's closer to the Catholics.
Mm-hmm. But it's still not Catholic.
No,
And they
of course.
wouldn't accept. They would argue that there is a difference, and theirs is the true church. Just as you would argue.
Yes, there is a difference. There is.
Just as you would argue. Just as you would argue, there is a difference between a British subject who is from Britain, or the British diaspora, and a British subject whose parents are from a different part of the previous British Empire. And I would argue that
non-Anglo-Celtic bits you're talking
I would argue that whether we like it or not, what we dislike now, just as the Protestants disliked the Catholics serving in high positions, will in time, many people will perceive it as absolutely normal.
Well, I'm not going to agree with that, and I think if people do,
if someone had said to you, if someone had said to you 400 years ago that Catholic, you'd have probably one of the greatest, if not one of the greatest, Britons was going to be an Irishman, and he was or from Ireland.
Who?
And he was. There's so much stuff that if you said it 200 years ago or 400 years ago,
which greatest Britain are you talking about?
Sorry, I got muddled there between the Irish and Catholics, because I was thinking Wellington, but of course he came from Ireland. I know there's the whole quote about horses born in a barn. Being born in a barn doesn't make you a horse.
He wasn't a Catholic, and he wasn't an Irishman. I'm sorry.
No, I was thinking of. Who was I thinking? It doesn't matter. The point I was trying to make is that if you said to someone something 200 years ago about Catholics, you'd be laughed out of town. And yet within 50 years, you had Catholics serve, you had that route unblocked for them to serve in those highest positions openly.
Enormous difference between a British Catholic, a British Anglo-Celtic Catholic, and someone from the subcontinent.
I would argue that you would say that because you're agnostic. You would not say that if you were a Protestant 200 years ago.
No.
Because they didn't.
But they would have.
No, it was a huge bone of contention that the Protestants absolutely hated the fact that Wellington had...
Sorry. So you've got my argument wrong here. What you're trying to say here is that to them it was a big enough difference, which, okay, it was to them.
And to you it's a big enough difference.
No.
But it won't be.
No. But the point is, 200 years ago, if you'd have spoken to both Protestants and Catholics who were British back then about some Indian thug,
they'd have laughed you out of town.
Yeah, they would have just laughed you out of town. But
the Protestants would have laughed you out of town over the Catholics as well.
But less than over an Indian. Far less, in fact.
The point is that today no one would bat an eyelid, and the point is today you wouldn't bat an eyelid.
No,
because no over the Catholics. I'm not talking about people from the Empire. I'm talking about you today would happily put your name behind a Catholic Prime Minister. That would have been unthinkable 200 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not too. I think you got to go back a little bit further than that, though, John.
Okay, that would have been unthinkable to Protestants 200 years ago.
Well, 250 years ago, then I'd probably go with you.
Well, it wasn't until the 1850s, was it? It was a massive. Possibly not that late. Actually, no, you're probably right. You're probably talking about
1820s. It started changing quite heavily.
It did, yes, but you'd still had the huge resistance at that point. But you're right. I mean,
but John,
yeah, it's about 200.
But you do know that in the Napoleonic Wars, for example, between the late 1790s and 1815, many British officers in the Royal Navy and the British Army
were Catholic.
Yeah,
Yeah, of
absolutely,
course.
they were. They
And
just
you
didn't
do know
make a
that
big
today that there are a number of British officers in the army, for example, that are black or Asian or whatever. Like,
But those guys are alien, and the Catholics weren't.
ideologically, they were alien.
No, totally disagree with you. Like I said, look,
Because you're coming at it from a modern day position and an agnostic position.
No, insofar as I have had anything to do with the Church of England, I'm High Church of England. All right, no women vicars, no loads of left wing shit. Basically, like my vicar was an ex-RAF.
Yeah, but it's not about left wing. It's about the difference
No,
between Protestantism and Catholicism.
but it is. But it is, John. I don't see how you don't see it.
I'm not sure what I'm meant to be seeing. The
There
difference ideologically.
What's the difference ideologically between a High Church of England chap and a Catholic? What's the real difference?
Enough for them to say that the other one's going to hell, or certainly going to purgatory for a long time.
I would dispute that, actually. Although
why would they have a separate church if they were interchangeable? They're not.
I don't think they're interchangeable. I never said they were. I said there wasn't much difference between them.
You think there isn't? If there wasn't much difference, then there wouldn't be a Catholic and a Protestant church. There wouldn't be a separation.
All right. Do you see a big difference yourself?
To you, we're arguing over split hairs.
I'm sorry.
To them, we're not.
All right. Yeah, okay. But do you yourself see a big difference? Like,
between
would you be an anti Jacob Rees-Mogg Prime Minister?
I might have been 200 years ago.
No, now.
Well, 200 years have passed, and it's a normal state of affairs. So of course I'm not.
Why are we concerned about 200 years ago? I don't get this.
Because
because you're trying to pretend that what was going on 200 years ago is the same as today, which it isn't.
What I'm trying to say to you is that ideologically, there is a difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. And at a period of time in our history, that difference was enough to bar people from the top jobs. Right. And then it wasn't enough to bar people from the top jobs. Right. And those people are now people you would consider for the top job.
But I'm not going to change about these.
No, you're not going to change. Because the Protestants 200 years ago wouldn't change.
But you are talking about completely alien people who don't come from the islands we're talking about.
Catholicism is a completely alien ideology.
Oh, how do you work that one out when England was a Catholic country before it was a Protestant country?
Aside from their colour indicating difference,
which it does, and their whole ancestry and where they come from in the world, whereas
what does that have to do with their capacity?
Protestants and Catholics came from the same place, did they not?
No,
in Britain.
Okay, so they were from the same genetic heritage. Their ideology was completely different. You wouldn't tolerate a leftist running for the leadership of the Conservative Party because their ideology is different. They could be the same colour as you, but their ideology is what is the problem.
Okay. I just think this is a false argument, because what you're trying to do here is to take us back several hundred years in history and then compare two groups of people who came from the same place with the same DNA, with the same historical heritage. Hang on, let me finish. With the same historical heritage, with alien invaders who are coming in today with a totally different DNA and historical heritage. The things are not the same, John. I'm sorry, they're just not. I mean, chat, am I talking shit here, or are they not the same? Because they're not, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'm not having a go at you here, John, but I just don't agree with what you're saying. It's like Like,
I'm not taking it as you having a go. You know, we're coming at the problem from different angles, and that's fine. We're having a discussion.
Queen Elizabeth I said famously she didn't want to look into men's hearts about their religion. Did she not?
Well, I mean, she may have said that, but she's certainly lopped off enough heads.
No, she didn't actually. That's not true. Absolutely not. Her sister did, who was a Catholic, but she didn't. She actually stopped that. She actually tried to get back to a middle ground. And she didn't. And listen, mate, the one thing I know about is history. She tried to stop that. She said, we don't want to look into men's hearts about what they believe about God. All right? But you can only do that if you have a basically homogeneous people. And that was what she tried to do. Was she perfect? No, of course she wasn't. But she did not lop off many heads, or she certainly didn't burn loads of people like her sister did. She just didn't. And that, to me, is the way the Brits should go. And that was where the Duke of Wellington went when he said, look, we've had Catholic officers in the Royal Navy and the British Army for years. We should just make it legal.
Okay. So we've had black people in the British Army for years. We should just make them serving in the high office legal.
No.
It's the same logic. How is that?
Because they've not been here since at the very, very earliest, in tiny little numbers. They have not been here at earliest before 1948.
I mean,
and they are totally alien to every single belief that most average Anglo-Celtic people have.
My beliefs have very little to do with the color of their skin. I would agree. It is totally an indicator.
That's you being a liberal modern person.
I would agree that it is an indication of a shared historical heritage. But there is virtually nothing of me that I share with someone like Keir Starmer, other than the fact we have a historical kinship, which is, as far as I'm concerned, totally worthless when it comes to mine and Keir Starmer's relationship, because he would see me and my family starved to pay for someone else's family.
For sure.
So that historical heritage and kinship, in the case of me and Keir, is absolutely worthless. It means nothing, because he would still see me starve for his ideology.
Sure. And?
Okay. But there are black people who, you're absolutely correct, I don't have that shared heritage and history with, but who ideologically support what I support.
So you support them rather than Starmer?
Than Keir Starmer, yeah.
See, I've struggled with this over the last few hours, and I don't think I could ever bring myself to support socialists. But what I will do, and what I think is going to happen, is I'm just going to tell people, look, you can't support the so-called, in inverted commas, air quotes, conservative party anymore, because they don't support you.
Even if the person they propose or that you're able to vote for will do everything they can against critical race theory, will do everything they can against educating children about sex in the classrooms, will do everything they can to reduce immigration, will do everything they can to raise the standards of the white working class, even if they said they were going to do that, and pretend, for example, they did do that,
and even if they were going to double the size of the Royal Navy, if they were a black or brown person and not an Anglo-Celt, no, I would not support them.
So you would happily have a Labour government instead of a black or brown person?
No, I won't.
Everything you wanted.
No.
Okay,
I did not say I will support the Conservative government.
I didn't say support. I said that you would see.
No, I won't vote Labour ever. I've never voted Labour.
I didn't say you would vote Labour, but if you don't vote for that person who would do everything you want them to do because of one thing that doesn't impact your ideology.
That is what I am going to do, and that is
So
why I
you
will
would
tell
rather see
yes,
a Keir Starmer government?
no,
By logical inference, you must.
no, because
If
I
your
am
choice,
not. John, I detest multiculturalism. I detest fake, in inverted commas, air quotes, diversity. I will not support any of these people. I don't care what claims they make. I
I'm
never
not even
will.
talking about claims. Let's say they hypothetically. Let's say you could absolutely.
I will not know, will I?
That's why it's an if. Let's assume that you could 100% trust them to say what they were going to do, and I accept that you can't. I accept that you can't.
Then I can't answer that.
Let's assume we can 100% trust Keir Starmer to do what he says he's going to do, which is socialism for the UK. And let's say we can 100% trust that Kemi Badenoch is going to do what she says she's going to do, which is the opposite of socialism for the UK. You would argue that we shouldn't support everything we'd want ideologically
I do
because of their
that,
skin color.
Yes, absolutely.
And therefore you would prefer Keir Starmer as PM.
No, not therefore because I would never support Keir Starmer.
Of course, if you've got a choice between two options, you must prefer the alternative.
No, I will go for the third option.
What third option?
The third option that we need a new, real British Conservative.
When are you making the new real party, Iron Duke?
I don't know, man, but that's what we need.
Because that's the problem. That's the problem. There isn't that new third party.
Well, there you go.
There isn't, and even if
John,
you combine,
John, you can continue down your road of I will do what is logical, and Britain will continue to be destroyed. I'm sorry, I'm not going to support that. I'm not.
How is voting for someone who is ideologically in favour of everything I would want destroying Britain?
Because they're not British. They're not British, man.
So even if they would do what is in Britain's best interest, because they're not British, 100%. You will not vote for them. So even if they would do everything that was in Britain's best interest,
absolutely 100%.
That is bizarre. I'm sorry.
Because they never will do any of that stuff. They never will.
No, that's not what I said.
I know that's not what you said, but the fact
you're assuming that you're assuming that they won't do anything they say. And I'm saying
I never said they won't do anything they say. They won't do stuff in favour of the British people. The Anglo-Celtic real British people. 100%.
But that's not engaging with the argument.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to engage in this argument then, because I think it's ridiculous, because they won't. They just won't.
I mean, you've made that assumption beforehand. You've found them guilty before the trials even started.
Yes.
I can't. There's no discussion to be had around that then.
There isn't. No, that's exactly what I've always said. There isn't.
So what are we doing here? Like I say, the third option. I've stood for Heritage Party. I've stood in my local constituency for Heritage Party for local candidates. They're not going anywhere. There isn't the support for them. They squandered what support they had by going down instead of focusing on libertarian values for the reason we shouldn't have lockdown. They went down the rabbit hole of the conspiracy theory, which, as I say, does not wash with the vast majority of people, rightly or wrongly.
Well, wrongly, but okay. I mean, 555 in the chat says this is essentially the CivNat versus FNat argument. I'm not a total FNat 555. I'm not, but I am an Anglo-Celtic FNat. I'm sorry, I just am. And if you don't believe,
but you're not, because you're in favour of Nepalese people who have served, and
I'm in favour of ex-Royal Gurkha Rifles who have served, John.
Who aren't British or Celtic or Anglo-Saxon but
are honorary British because they've served
in your view.
Royal Gurkha. Yeah, absolutely, in my view. Well, if it wasn't in my view, I wouldn't be saying it, would I? But you know,
that's the distinction. You've drawn arbitrary.
But they're one exception. They're the one exception. I have no others.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I can't. That's your exception. I can't argue with that. I have different exceptions.
Yeah, fair enough, and that's fine. Look, I'm not saying you and I are. Well, obviously, I'm saying I'm right, but I'm not saying that your position is ridiculous. I just think it's a position we've had for ages, and it's just going to make us worse and worse.
I'm just saying I would
Because
love to see an
you
alternative,
don't
and I've tried to be part of it,
but you
but I
don't
don't
have
see
a stop.
one.
But you don't have a stop line, John. You don't have this far and no further. There's no knee plus ultra for you.
Sorry, I missed that part. Can you say that again?
There's no knee plus ultra for you. There is this far and no further, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just like I say, I don't see that there is the third option, and
There you
so
go.
I default to pragmatism.
Yeah,
I've tried
and
becoming involved in the third option. What I ideally hoped would become the third option,
yep.
but there's no appetite from the general public, and I'm not a big fan of democracy, as you well know. I would prefer that the government was so small that no one felt they even needed to vote. I don't want to have to vote on anything. I don't believe democracy is good for people.
Totally agree with that.
But
Totally agree with that.
the reality I'm faced with is different to what I would have it be. And so within that reality, within that framework, I have to do what I believe will get me to that framework. And what I believe will get me to that framework is not allowing Rishi to come in, not allowing Keir Starmer to come in, but to side with people who ideologically have demonstrated that they're interested in voting in ways I would have them vote. And if they're not Anglo-Celtic, but happen to be a British subject by whatever distinction exists to define them as British subject, then, like I say, let the chips fall where they may, because as I see it, there isn't another option at the moment. I would happily back any other option.
All right.
And I've tried to be that other option because I believe that if there's no one in your constituency that represents you, you should represent you.
And fine, John. I see your point. Don't agree with you, but I do see your point. I would just say to George in the chat, who's talking to me, just accept your position isn't reasonable and move on. George, join the stream or fuck off, mate.
Come on, George.
That's all I got to say. Join the
I've
stream
got a bit more
and I'll
battery.
talk to you.
I've got 24% left. Let's go, George. Yeah. Come on.
George, join the stream, mate, or fuck off. I don't care about you heckling from the sidelines, mate. But yeah, look, my view is not the same.
Sure. I mean, that's variety is the spice of life.
As I said, I make one single exception. That's the only one I make. Apart from that, a non-Anglo-Celtic British Prime Minister, and none of the people in this lineup, this really grim lineup of potential Conservative leaders and Prime Ministers.
Do they have to be male as well? Just
I would prefer it, I have to say.
So you're not a Penny Mordaunt fan either.
No, not really. No.
I don't know if you know, but the foreword to her book was written by Bill Gates, gushing about all the stuff Bill Gates.
I saw that, and that's one reason I'm not a Penny Mordaunt fan. And
look,
I mean, of course,
I'm not going to lie to you.
Liz Truss is insane. I mean,
well,
I'm not very bright.
If Liz Truss runs and she's the option against Rishi, I would vote for Liz Truss because she's going to level down London.
Yeah, I mean,
London is going to get so leveled down by Putin. Thanks to Liz Truss.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, if it comes to Liz Truss versus Sunak, I'll vote. I would absolutely support Liz Truss. And if London goes, the only thing I would miss would be the historic buildings, because there's very few Anglo-Celtic people who now live in London, apart from a load of lefties who I don't care whether they're still around tomorrow. So yeah, absolutely. I don't care about that.
Yeah,
In
listen,
Minecraft, of course.
I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that the Conservative Party leadership lineup represents everything I'd like to see from a Conservative Party.
Mate, I'm
not going to lie and pretend
I
that.
was so desperate at one stage, as you know, I was going to support Ben Wallace, who is
Sure.
a thicko, basically. But he would have supported stronger British forces, and the British Armed Forces are really dangerously weak these days, particularly the Royal Navy. And he was also, because he was once captured by the provisional IRA scum, he was in favour of keeping Ulster part of Britain. And that would be the only basis I would have supported him on. But he's withdrawn. Do you think there's any chance Jacob Rees-Mogg will run?
If he does, I think it will be for pragmatic reasons. I don't think he will run with the view of getting to the final two. I think he will run. If he does run, it will be to build a support base that he can throw behind someone else and get a cabinet. Jacob Rees-Mogg needs to be the Chancellor. Let's be honest. That's what he needs to be. That's what he wants to be. I don't think he's PM material. Not because I don't think he would make a good PM, but because I think he would make the kind of PM that people 200 years ago would have desired. And because democracy is what it is, people don't desire him in the modern day for a PM. But he would make a fantastic Chancellor in the modern day. That I think Conservative voters, crucially, would accept.
Yeah. Look, I am disappointed with Jacob Rees-Mogg over the last few years. I am prepared to take, to some degree, cabinet collective responsibility from
bear in mind that as soon as Jacob Rees-Mogg got a chance to comment on Rishi Sunak, he wasted no time in sticking the boot in.
Yeah, and good.
Wasted no time at all. He was begging to be asked that question.
Yeah. Ninius in the chat says, Poodler PM Liz Truss is hiding in Tottenham, and she also spends lots of time in Peckham and Tower Hamlets. Mate, I was born in Peckham, in the London borough of Southwark, in 1965, at which stage it was about 90% white. But you wouldn't believe it anymore, mate. You wouldn't believe it anymore. But yeah. So yeah, I don't know. If Rees-Mogg stands, I'll support him for sure.
If Rees-Mogg stands, I'd support him 100%.
Yeah, but he's the least worst again.
Yeah.
I just don't understand how the so-called Conservative Party comes out with a candidate list which has a majority non-Anglo-Celtic people.
You don't. I'll tell you what's interesting. What you seem to have in the Conservative Party is you seem to have a slate of candidates who would want to use the state and are left-wing, and you have a slate of candidates who are libertarian, and therefore it doesn't matter particularly whether they're left-leaning or right-leaning because they want small state. And then you have, you don't seem to have that candidate who would use the state for, I loathe to use the term right-wing aim because various people will jump to the conclusion that I mean Nazi Germany, and of course I don't.
No, you just mean pro-British, which is what I mean.
Yeah, essentially.
Oh, here we go. We're getting George. There we go.
Hey.
George, good day.
I'll shut up and let George speak for a bit.
Right.
But I hang on, George. I do just agree with what John was just saying, is that there is no pro-British candidate at all, to be honest.
Right. I'm not going to be here for very long because it gets quite exhausting doing these arguments. But the basic thing is that, like, look, it's perfectly fine to say that, like, look, my argument isn't consistent. Like, okay, I'll take X group because, you know,
I know other.
Sure, but like, you know, it's perfectly fine to say that, but
Yes.
like John is asking you reasonable questions about the logical consistency of your arguments. Like, for instance, talking about the difference between, you know, why one category of group or category like religion is not distinguishable from another, and you're basically saying, no, it's not different. And it's like none of that is sufficiently substantiated. Now, look, I don't care enough to be too invested in this, but like, if you want to, but like, I don't go in with the presumption that, yeah, man, this is a logically consistent argument, because it's just not, and it's painfully obvious. So yeah, just own the fact that you're not being consistent and move on.
I mean, to be fair, I think he has said that. I mean, he's got his rule and he's got his exception, and that's.
I've got one exception, just one. Gurkha rifles, nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what the other thing you guys were talking about.
We were talking about like 200 years ago.
Catholicism and Protestantism.
People would have thought Catholicism was different, or let's say 150 years ago, maybe your religion, George. You know, like what's it called?
I don't think they would have known we existed.
Yeah, exactly.
Is George a Jedi?
Sure.
No. He's Orthodox. He's Orthodox.
I might as well be.
All right. Yeah, he's Orthodox, but like it doesn't. If you're a Anglo-Celt who is Orthodox or Catholic or High Church of England, all right.
Hold on a sec, fellas. I've got to just go for a sec.
No worries. If you're an Anglo-Celt who is Church of England, particularly High Church of England, or Catholic or Orthodox, I don't see why you guys are going to end up killing each other. Yeah, I mean, 200 years ago we might have done, but not now.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Iron Duke. Did you do a tour in Ireland?
I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland, mate.
And what was happening in Northern Ireland?
The Marxist dominated.
The Catholics and the Protestants.
No. Well, you can let me finish or not. I don't care. The Marxist dominated, and actually Trotskyist in large degree dominated. Provisional IRA were trying to get rid of the British from Ireland so they could bring in millions of Somalians, which is their plan now under Sinn Féin in Southern Ireland. So yeah, Brits out, Somalians in. You know, that was what was happening.
And was there not significant division between Protestant Catholics and Protestant Irish?
Yeah, but yes, there was. But look, understand, John.
And of course,
John, understand. My mother was a Catholic from Southern Ireland.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, but you know,
my dad was Church of England. But
you know that the problems that Wellington was dealing with stemmed from Ireland.
Was that?
It was the Catholicism in Ireland. It never went away.
Except in it did, except in Northern Ireland, yeah.
Well,
but you also understand that, like, it's a traditional thing there. By the time I was there in the 1980s, the differences between working class Catholics and working class Protestants were not that huge, to be honest.
Well,
that's wrong.
You know, Andrew, that I'm not of the opinion that I don't believe all these different cultures can be assimilated. I don't believe they can. And I would argue the obvious example of that we have from our own islands is the disagreements we still have between the Celtic parts and the Anglo-Saxon parts after 1,500 years of cohabitation. I don't believe you can get rid of those differences.
Yeah, look, I mean, I just think that reinforces my argument, but okay. George, you said that's not true. Carry on. Why do you say that?
Right, sorry, I just needed to go through a bit. Yeah, so the main thing that was the main question John was giving you, which I think was a perfectly reasonable argument, which you basically just refused to engage with, was like, okay, so you have a choice between, say, Keir Starmer and Kemi. And like, I actually quite like Kemi. I think she's actually a pretty like, as Tories go, she's not a bad egg at all. But like, you basically, when he said like pick, you have to pick one, because the reality is that no other party is capable of winning a majority. You basically flip the table and said, I don't want to play this game.
Right now.
Sorry?
Right now. No other party is capable of winning right now, but that could change.
Well, do you have a plan? How do you plan to do that?
I don't have a plan, mate, but we need
do you understand any campaigning? Do you understand any of the analytics involved? Do you understand?
I believe if we don't get rid of the current so-called Conservative Party, Britain is done.
Well, okay, fine. That's a moral claim, but that's not an objective claim.
Keir Starmer would be a better candidate.
You are not willingly engaging with the argument, which is pick your poison.
No, then I'm not. Then I'm going to pick no poison. I'm sorry.
Well, that's not the fucking point, you.
And everyone else is going to pick your poison for you.
Yes,
fine.
Yeah,
everyone else will pick their poison, and
no,
I
they'll
will
pick
go
it
for
for
something.
you too.
No, I'll go for something that isn't poison.
Yeah, but you'll be made to drink their poison anyway.
Does the government just magically not apply to you?
Well, he lives in the outback, right? So.
Yeah.
Then it's like where
I wish I lived in the outback. But
so actually, other people do pick their poison for you then.
No, I will not. I will not support.
Dude, it's really so simple.
All right, I'm going to try again here. Okay, you and I are basically we're basically disagreeing on the premise. I will not pick any poison for the British people. I will pick something which is not poison.
Fine. Well, do you accept the fact then that other people will vote for the poison and you will have to take it by virtue of how government works?
And I will work against that poison.
How?
What I do all the time. What I devote most of my spare time to.
So the government starts saying to little kids, hey, you should cut your dick off. And your answer is like your big response, your basic refusal to do that when everyone's children is undergoing that, and your potential grandchildren is what?
I won't support anyone that supports that.
It's nothing to do with fucking support.
Listen, guys. George, I'm not getting where you're coming from, mate. I'm not going to support any of these children of the British Empire pretending they are British.
It's such a simple question.
But I won't support any of them. No.
Who will not let that happen?
No.
So you won't. Okay, so you are hypothetically, let's just give you this little hypothetical. Suppose that you are the only person in the world who can affect the choice of government, and you have the choice to either A, vote for Kemi, or B, not vote at all. If you don't vote at all, then Keir Starmer gets into power. If you do vote, Kemi gets into power. And you know for a fact that if Keir Starmer gets into power, he'll do something crazy like, I don't know, he'll demand that all women need to abort their fetuses. Like it's compulsory abortion. Do you vote for Kemi in that circumstance?
So this is a completely ridiculous
hypothetical.
You can call it ridiculous, fine.
It's a ridiculous
the entire point of this is that basically you're not willing to actually engage with arguments, and you're not willing to actually say, look, maybe John has a point, actually. Maybe there is such a thing as pick your poison.
George, give me a realistic argument, and I will honestly answer it. That is
fine. Okay, fine.
That's because all right. Let me give you. Hang on. Wait. I'll give you an argument. Okay.
Well, you asked me to give you a reasonable argument. I'm going to give you a reasonable argument now.
You can
so
in a
consider,
minute.
for
You
example,
can in a minute. Wait, you can in a minute, but let me answer you first. My argument to you would be, if I could wave a magic wand and have Enoch Powell back today, I'd vote for him.
That's not the fucking choice.
But you're giving me a choice. I don't like any of them. I don't like any of
no
them.
one likes either of them. That's like there's that entire South Park skit about you have to choose between a turd sandwich and a giant douche.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not going to do that.
Okay, fine. Then the turd sandwich wins.
If you say so.
I mean,
I'd sooner work for an alternative.
If you think it's unrealistic, let's scale it down in terms of probability. Okay, let's say you're one of. Oh, I don't know. Let's say that the Conservative and the Labour Party are tied neck and neck, and your constituency is the one that will either give a Labour majority or a Conservative majority, and you're the pivotal voter in that district. Okay.
And who's the Prime Minister?
You get to choose between Kemi and Keir Starmer. Okay. Yeah. And if you don't choose Kemi, then Keir Starmer wins by default.
I probably wouldn't vote.
Socialism.
So you would vote for Keir Starmer?
No, I wouldn't vote for either of them.
This is the trolley problem where Iron Duke would just walk away from the lever.
Yeah, I just say no. I'm not going to vote for either of you. I'd vote for somebody else. I wouldn't vote for either of those two.
Okay.
Because I think they're equally bad. You see.
But you have to accept the reality of democratic politics, which is the fact that
I'm not a supporter of democracy, man.
He's not saying you have to support it. He's saying you have to accept it or not.
It's shit and it's not real anyway.
You can create this wish list.
Hold on. If democracy is shit and it's not real anyway, what makes you think there is any third option?
Because we've had them in the past.
So democracy is not shit?
No, we've had other options other than democracy in the past.
Okay, but you've just said, and I quote, sorry, I've forgotten the second part, but it's shit and it doesn't change anything.
No, I didn't say it doesn't change anything. I said
what was the second part?
It's not real.
Okay.
If there was real democracy, Britain would have stopped mass immigration 50 years ago.
Okay, then what makes you think having a third option within that paradigm would change anything?
I don't know. I'm hoping it will.
I'm hoping
it will. I'm hoping it will, because if it doesn't, we're going to end up with violence, and obviously I don't want that.
You know what this basically is? This is basically like Duke's on death row, and he's been given a final meal, and he's told, "Look, you can either get bread and water, or
I'm not having your meal because I don't want to die."
And then he basically says, "No, I want a roast beef." And I'm like, "We're not going to give you a roast beef." He's like, "But I gotta get one anyway."
No, absolutely not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Look, guys. Do you know what my big hope is? My big hope is, and we talked about this for the first, 2/3 of the stream.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the economic problems we are heading into give us the best possible chance we have had in 150 years of changing stuff, seriously changing stuff. Because I reckon the average Joes are really going to get fed up with what we're heading into.
And then it might be in your interest to vote for Keir Starmer then, because that will surely make it worse.
That's a possibility. I haven't really considered that, but yeah, that is a possibility.
You take the Richard Spencer pill and
no, not at all. I would take the
accelerate to oblivion so we can come out the other side.
I would take the Peter Hitchens pill, not the Richard Spencer pill.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pop off. The main thing I was here to basically say is that you just like when someone tries to give you an argument, you just basically flip the table and refuse to play, and it's really annoying.
I know it is. I could almost be a leftist, couldn't I?
Yeah, that's the sum of it.
Yeah, I could. I know, except that I'm not a leftist at all, as you know. But
So I'm gonna pop off here because
thank you for joining, Georges. You're
Thanks,
always
George.
welcome.
all right,
You're
cheerio, fellas.
always welcome. No, John. Yeah, you might even be right, but if I did, it'd be the P. Hitchens bill, not the gay, fed Nazi larper Richard Spencer guy. Like I'm not a Napoleon. What's he called?
I'm still not wholly convinced that Pete Hitchens isn't a Trotskyite agent.
Oh, listen, do you know what? You're not totally alone. You're not totally alone in that. I think there's a bit of Trotskyist still in Peter Hitchens, for sure. He's nowhere near as bad as his late brother, but yeah, for sure.
I mean, for all his complaint that the Tory party is ruined and needs to be destroyed, he's a basic centre-right person, and that's what makes it so interesting. Like, if he thinks it's that bad as a centre-right person, then my goodness, how bad is it really?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, like, Peter Hitchens is way to the left of me, way to the left.
Yeah,
and he can see how crap the Tory party is. So, as you say, that's how bad it really is.
yeah. I mean,
but yeah, he was right when he said, "Don't vote for Cameron." He was right.
I guess the thing is, if I'm right and it's a 2-term parliament and it's basically going to be pooed on by Labour, maybe it is best that the person in charge is a on the left of the Conservative Party, because it means that when they do have a left winger in charge of the Conservative Party, and when they still lose to a left winger in the Labour Party, and when the Labour Party drive us into oblivion, then they will go for someone on the right. Maybe that's the best thing to. Maybe Rishi is the best candidate if that's, if you believe that state of affairs would happen. But
I hate to say it, but I think you might be right. Actually, I'm not sure. Is Rishi Sunak on the right, on the left of the? I mean, I don't know who's left and right in the Conservative Party.
If you're talking fiscally, he pretends to be on the right, in the sense that when you're talking left and right, you are talking a fiscal divide. But the reality is he's been a high tax and high spend chancellor. So
absolutely, and a high money printing chancellor too.
If you're talking about left and right in that terminology, which is whether people realise it or not, that is what the left-right divide is typically. I don't know whether he's an authoritarian or a high state control or low state control, but he's certainly
I thought he was
on the left.
I thought he was a slimy bugger whose family were doing all sorts of tax cons.
Well,
I mean, when he was chancellor, for God's sake.
No one believes they should pay tax. Everyone believes someone else should.
Oh, God. John, can you do me a favour? I've got to go to my door.
Yeah,
Can you just talk for like 2 minutes? I'll be back.
I don't know what I'm meant to talk about. How's chat tonight? Let's have a look at the comments. I haven't looked at any of them. Probably calling me a libertarian. Loafer Sheffield. 2 J's stood in front of a firing squad. Have you any final requests? Can we stand behind the wall? Bernard Manning. Yeah, that's right. Problem is, it's not just one Indian candidate, it's the whole field. Indicates something's wrong. Yeah, that's the consequence of I can't remember, was it called the A list? David Cameron trying to out liberal the Labour Party, despite the fact that Conservatives pretend they don't do all women shortlists and affirmative action. They absolutely did under Cameron, and that's what we're seeing kind of come through now. Yeah, we now worship basketball players. That's correct. I've got a associate, goes by the name of Economic Erudite, who basically thinks our problem is that we venerate people that the ancient civilizations like ancient Rome would have considered to be prostitutes, like actors and such, actors and gladiators, which would have been the sports stars of the day.
Yeah, those guys were regarded as like beneath contempt, you know.
Yeah, they were just vermin.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Sorry, I've got a little old lady who lived next door to me, and she just wanted some milk. So, I look, guys. I have my disagreements with John here, and I have my disagreements with George, but I like and respect both of them. My problem is with this election that I am increasingly coming to view it as it's a con job, and it's designed to present when eventually it comes down to the ordinary members of the Conservative Party, it's designed to present them with a Hobson's choice, which is probably going to be a non-Anglo-Celtic person. I really think that's what's going on at the moment, and that is why the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, etc., is so much supporting it.
I tell you what's interesting. I don't want to drag this on too long. I did an article for the Wellington Project. I released it yesterday on why I don't even think the membership should get a vote today, to be honest. But I mean, I assume you're aware that up until Alec Douglas Hume, Conservative Party members didn't even get a vote on. Post Hume, they didn't get a vote. The only reason they got a vote thereafter is because there was such an uproar over that selection. And it went so badly because he was like a 1 year, didn't even manage a year, 364 days.
Well, he was a lord, wasn't he? And then
he was a lord.
He gave up his peerage
and then got a safe seat. Yes, correct. But he was picked by the existing PM, as was the tradition. But he was picked essentially in the existing PM's view that he could unite the party, and there were MPs within the party who would have preferred another candidate, believing that candidate could unite the country and therefore give them a mandate to rule. You know, a mandate that they would have sustained at general election.
He was pretty left wing by Tory standards in the.
Everyone was left wing back then.
Late 1950s.
Everyone.
Yeah.
I mean,
they still are.
I would argue they were further left than they are today, in many respects.
No.
Hold on. Left financially. Bear in mind, I'm talking about the financial left-right divide.
Yeah, fair enough.
Whether they were for big state or for small state, absolutely, you're right. I would probably argue that they're worse today, but financially, at least, they were very left-wing. Price controls, rent controls.
I don't know how far this goes, but like my deal has never really been the financial story. I mean, yes, I know it's vital and important and all the rest of it, but I could put up with a relatively left-wing financial Conservative Party that was right-wing in all other respects. I could.
I mean, if you go by Marx, his view is that capitalism is just a stepping stone on the road to Marxism or communism, which is to say that capitalism provides many of the resources that the socialist state would then use to transition into a utopia. So, I mean, I would argue that by Marx's convention, what you said there would be further to the left, in his view, at least. If he went.
All right. It's like, I mean, we talked about this earlier. Like, if Britain reopened 2 or 3 coal mines and made them really efficient and mechanized,
I think they're opening a new coal mine.
I do believe there is a plan to do so, and
which is good.
Very good. Absolutely, totally agree. And apart from anything else, you have to have coal mines if you're going to make steel, because you need coking coal to make steel.
And I believe we export as much steel as we import, actually.
Well, it depends. Actually, I know a little bit about that because I've looked into British warship building, and we have had our problems, shall we say? But on that, I would be happy with a British government that fairly strictly controlled that. Fracking, I'm not against fracking, so long as it's done as environmentally friendly as it can be done. I'm absolutely in favour of that, and I am most certainly in favour of building half a dozen new British nuclear power stations.
I'm not against nuclear. My problem with nuclear is that we don't and we never have had a joined up policy on how we deal with the nuclear waste, and
Well,
you know,
you got to bury it really deep somewhere.
Well,
away from
well, the problem is, Duke, historically, our policy was to throw it in a 13-kilometre deep trench in the English Channel called Herd's Deep, which you're probably aware of, in iron barrels, which now rotting into the ocean, leaching nuclear waste into our fishing grounds.
We can do better than that for sure.
Yeah, but until they nail that down on paper, I'm a bit adverse to nuclear on the basis that we don't have a policy on how we deal with that waste yet.
Yeah, no, but look, we don't have a policy on loads of important issues, in my opinion, John. Yeah. But look, so all of that I'm in favour of, and I'm not in. I don't care if the British government controls that pretty hard, to be honest. Yeah. I really don't. If they said we're gonna have zero, we're gonna have zero net immigration. We are absolutely gonna let hardly any of these cross-channel migrants into the country, and we're going to send them all somewhere fairly unpleasant for at least 6 months until we decide, that I'd go for all of that immediately.
I'm not, despite being, I say, a libertarian, I'm not entirely opposed to a small state saying that there is a security benefit to having a 100% or a significant percentage of our energy industry being wholly, nationalized. I think there are arguments to make for that.
And let's be clear here, Britain is not a small state in terms of population. We are not a small state.
No, I mean small state in terms of
in terms of government, yeah, okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah, I
agree.
There is an argument that you can make that it's in the national security interest to have a domestic, fully functional, nationalised power grid. I mean, many people wouldn't make that argument on the right. I think you can make it. I'm not necessarily sold either way. I think there's an advantage to it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, John. Look, I think utilities.
But, this is what I was going to say. The problem is, once you start going down that rabbit hole, how far do you go? Because, I mean, I would argue that it would be incredibly important that our state, even if we currently export most of it and import other stuff, would be that we should be food self-sufficient. And we're not. And, of course, the more people you add and the more farmland you turn into houses, the worse you make it. And it's fine when global supply chains work and you can export a little bit of wheat and buy in tons of bananas and oranges and pineapples and strawberries and everything else that you bring in. But when that doesn't work and you don't have enough wheat to feed your population, that's going to get miserable quick.
Absolutely. I would say that Britain would find it very, very difficult to feed itself these days.
It's impossible. We haven't been able to do it since World War II, and of course, we've made advancements
before World War II. Actually,
and of course, we've made advancements that mean we probably could feed that World War II population now on the land we have available. But of course, we don't have that land available anymore because we've built on it for 20 million people from other countries to come here. So
Totally agree. And also, of course, the latest British government plan is to cover hundreds of thousands of acres with solar panels. You can't grow anything on that land either. And it will also destroy all the British wildlife that lives in that area. All of it.
Here's the thing, Anjik, though. If I don't have a problem with the government saying, look, we really want to back solar and we're going to stick solar panels everywhere. Why not stick them on the roofs of people's houses? Why do you have to?
It's the
Why do you
only
have to
place
turn fields that grow crops into fields that grow death?
because the amount of solar energy you will get from a British roof's house
Mm-hmm.
is not sufficient to do
How
more.
is that different?
Well, look, it's not sufficient if you're going to totally depend on green energy.
No,
which
I'm
is
not saying
what-
it is. But what I'm saying is,
but that's what the British government want to do.
no, but what I'm saying is, if you're going to install millions of solar panels, instead of installing those in green field, and okay, there's a cost to it because it costs more to put it on a roof than it costs to put it in a field. Fine,
John, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I
put
think
it on
you're totally
people's
right.
houses.
Yeah, I totally agree. If
You know?
you're going to put them anywhere, put them on people's houses.
I would rather
Please don't put them on like lovely, beautiful,
No.
medieval
Sure.
homes houses.
Put them on all the rancid new builds you're building.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I'm totally in agreement with you. But that's not their deal. Their deal is they want net zero.
Mm.
And to get net zero in UK, that would not be enough. You would have to cover 2/3 of the southeast, and it will be the southeast because the southeast gets most of the British sunshine.
You'll be pleased to know then that Suella Braverman has said that she is absolutely against net zero, and she thinks it needs to be ditched straight away.
On that, I would agree with her. It won't make me vote for her, but on that, I would agree with her. Yeah,
that is the best endorsement she's going to get from Iron Duke.
Absolutely, it is. We're gonna go for 9 minutes more, John.
All right.
Just so that we come to 3 hours because that's what
that's fine.
But look, as I say,
I may not last 9 minutes, to be honest. I've got 7% of my battery left, and it tends to die.
All right, well, fair enough. So, give me your best to worst of the so far declared candidates for the thing.
I would say it depends on what outcome you want, but if we're gonna forget the future and just focus on their policies, of the ones I know that have declared so far, my worst is Rishi, followed by Tom Tugendhat, followed by Grant Shapps, then Suella Braverman, and then Kemi Badenoch is, in my opinion, ideologically my preferred candidate.
Wow. And you don't sound all that enthusiastic about any of them, to be honest.
Well, I'd have rather voted for Steve Baker, but he's put his support for Suella.
Yeah, and I mean, even Steve Baker came out supporting Black Lives Matter and God knows.
Yeah, he walked some of that back. I think his comments come from the same sort of area I'm in, which is the pragmatism, and I think that there's Kemi Badenoch was actually very strong on BLM. She called it what it was straight away, which again is another plus for her in my book. But yeah, none of them are perfect.
Lofa Sheffield in the chat says World War I UK was not food independent. Absolutely true. UK in prior and during World War One used to get a load of very relatively cheap food from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, etc.
The Empire.
Yeah, well, the White Empire anyway, the Old Commonwealth.
Sure.
Didn't get very much from the Black and Brown Empire, to be honest.
I'm sure it got some other benefits. Otherwise, what was the point of it, right? I know it was run at a cost before anyone says.
Yeah, I was just going to say
it
was run at a loss by that stage, mate. The main thing Britain got in the Far East was the Indian Army, which made Britain a superpower in the Far East. Because
India was the key to the empire, really.
Well, 250,000 soldiers in the Far East, you know, so that was kind of big deal.
And I mean, it's a great staging post for the region as well, right? It's a lot harder to manage stuff in Australia from England. It's much easier from India.
Absolutely, and like Australia never provided all that many soldiers. They were good soldiers, but they weren't many of them.
No, but you know, the one thing I always thought Australia had going for it was, and I've said this on this stream before, so if anyone's listened, I'll have heard it before, but they didn't unlike other nations in the empire and what would become the Commonwealth, I guess they didn't declare war themselves. They simply said that the mother nation is at war and therefore we are also at war, which are
Yeah,
I think it's a shame
did.
we don't have that kind of association today.
Well, even I'll tell you something that many Brits don't know. Even in 1982, New Zealand, which then had a conservative government, by the way, provided a warship in the Indian Ocean to replace a British warship. So that British warship
Falklands.
so that British warship in the Indian Ocean could then go to the Falklands War. And the Australian government immediately said, if the British government had asked us, we would have done exactly the same.
I wonder if that would be the same now.
Possibly. Maybe not. Actually, maybe more now than it would have been like 10 years ago.
Well, given the new submarine deal and stuff, maybe so.
Yeah, it's not just the submarines, John. Canada and Australia are building the new British Type 43 frigate. And actually, Australia plans to build more of them than Britain does, which kind of makes me a bit sad. But you
might need the more with China to the north.
Yeah, well, Britain will never fight an American war against China, of course. But okay, if you believe that, mate, you're really foolish. But anyway,
I never said that.
No, I know you didn't. But if you did, you'd be foolish. I am going to tell my son. My son has a dream. Okay, he's a flight commander at the moment in the Fleet Air Arm in the Royal Navy. And he has a dream of commanding a squadron. And then he has a dream of maybe commanding a carrier. Because, like, British fighter pilots in the Fleet Air Arm can command aircraft carriers.
Okay.
And that's his dream. But if we end up with a non-British Prime Minister, a non-Anglo-Celtic Prime Minister, I will be very strongly telling him, fuck off with the Royal Navy and leave it, mate.
I mean, that's incredibly likely that's what you're going to be doing, I'm afraid.
Well, that's what I will do. And I will also be telling every other young British man, don't join the British Armed Forces. I mean, look
not many of them are anyway. That's not the problem.
Did you see the stream the Royal Navy? Sorry, the video the Royal Navy put out last week.
Dude, the army, the military stuff for the UK has been terrible for a long time.
Yeah, but did you see the one?
I've not seen the most recent one, no.
All right, the one I put out last week, and I did stick it in your Discord videos and memes channel.
Sure.
Was the Royal Navy at the London Gay Pride Parade. And the only thing I am happy with is because I put it on a few channels and I asked everyone to downvote it. The last time I looked, it had one more downvote than upvote. So we were winning. And it was basically like, why would any family allow their young British dude son to go and join the Royal Navy when it supports gay pride? Why would you?
Well, I certainly don't see it as being like it's not like a sweetener, is it? It's not. If I'm mumming and ahhing about it, it's not going to make me want to sign up even more.
No. Why are you going to let your 17, 18-year-old son, go and join the Royal Navy because they support gay pride?
Well, Andrew, this is why I said right at the beginning that I don't think the British people are atheists, because I think we do have the state religion used to be Christianity. I think it's now a blend of statism. It's the NHS and it's the LGBTQ and it's the BLM. I mean, that's the new state religion. And if you don't believe it, you're a heretic, and we're going to make your life difficult until you do believe it.
John, it's absolutely the religion of the elites. I agree with you totally. I mean, that's why the Royal Navy put that video out.
Sure.
I don't think it's the beliefs of the average British people at all.
No. They're waiting for something to fill that spiritual void.
The,
I think a lot of them. I think for a lot of them, it is the NHS. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe not the LGBTQ yet, but
no, I don't think it's LGBTQ at all.
I think
I'm not even sure it's the NHS, to be honest.
I think there's a distinct reason why the NHS ended up with the rainbow as being their sort of symbol. All through COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting that was the choice.
I don't disagree with you for a minute.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you for 1 minute about that. But yeah, look, we're in a state, guys. We are in a state. And I don't think the Conservative Party is going to solve it. I think we have to go for a third party. Do I know how to do that? No, I don't. But it's what I'll fight for so long as I breathe, because Great Britain is the best country in the bloody world, Well, it used to be, beg your pardon. Bravest, most intelligent, most innovative, best people in the whole world, and it's being destroyed because we keep importing people from less good parts of the world. But yeah, that's really what I think. Anything you want to show, John? Okay, John's gone. John, I know, is part of the Wellington Project. Go and check out the Wellington Project. I haven't got the links, but if John sends them to me on my Discord, I will put them in the description. Meantime, for me, I would chill our I will chill. I know I'm being boom and tech, guys. Sorry. Amazon. No. I will shill our Discord channel, which is the one I'm just putting in the chat now. Please go and subscribe to our Discord channel. Subscribe to this channel and also give us a like, guys, because it helps us. And I'll see you next week. So go well. And like I said, I know John's involved with the Wellington Project, and when I get the details from him, I will stick it in the description. So go well, folks.